Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Carcamo, President of Civil CAD Learning Solutions and also President of the DFW BIM Infrastructure User Group. And thank you for joining us today. Today, it's going to be an exciting day. We actually have roughly a 7 to 8 hour tips and tricks, Autodesk tips and tricks on various Autodesk products. We have a lot of industry experts, also Autodesk speakers taking part in this webinar. Today, I'll be getting started with the Civil 3D tips and tricks. You'll find other instructors coming in today, also sharing their insight on some tips and tricks. We also have some InfoWorks tips and tricks. We have some Autodesk Cloud, Revit, AutoCAD, Autodesk InfoDrainage, and but yeah. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I'll go and get started. Let me share my screen. All right, so let me go and share my screen. Let's share. And let me know if you can see the screen. If you can see the screen, just give me if you can just raise your hand if you can see the screen. Okay, good, awesome. Okay, so like I said, my name is I'm the president of a user group, so I've actually shared tips and tricks on our user group platform, and I'm also president of Civil CAD Learning Solutions. So I'm also an instructor. I go and teach Civil 3D, InfoWorks, vehicle tracking, and AutoCAD throughout the United States. I do tech support, create templates, and all kinds of stuff, and design services. And something I see a lot when I go around and teach is certain tools that are not being used and taken advantage of. And the first one I'll talk about is the crop surface. And I'm really surprised sometimes people forget about this tool here when they're working on large projects. So for example, I have this is a small city in Texas, and you may have a very large project that's in multiple phases, and you've downloaded some LiDAR on this project. And you want to take a portion of the LiDAR data. You don't want to bring this whole thing in to your project. So you're doing it in phases. So one time I was doing some tech support for a client, and their files were getting really bloated because of this LiDAR file. It was making the design files, like 80 megabytes to 100 megabytes. So we went and showed them to do a crop surface based on the actual areas they're working in. It brought it down to like 20 megabytes from 80 to 20. So that's what I'm going to show you today. Some of you may know this tool, but most of the people I kind of run into don't know about this tool, don't use it for very large surface data. So for example, I got this LiDAR data. I actually downloaded from InfoWorks using the InfoWorks tool. And this is actually existing GIS data. It's using two different models. And I'm going to come in, and I could either select an area where I want to grab a surface data. So I'm just drawing a polyline in here. Maybe I just want this area. Okay. And I'm going to go into the Home tab on the ribbon, then go under Create Ground Data. There's a surface pull down here. And at the bottom, it says Create Crop Surface. Okay, but I need to save my drawing because it won't run the command unless I save my drawing. I'm going to go in here now and say create crop surface. And up top, it says, okay, this is the surface it wants. The method, we're going to select the little icon to the right, the selection icon. And it's asking us, do you want to do it by object or polygon? So you can draw the polygon or you can select the object. Maybe I'll do O for object and select this polygon I just created. Hit enter, point in the area in the crop surface. There we go. Then it asks us, you want to create a new drawing or you want to place it in another drawing. You have different options. So in here, it says I can select an open drawing. I can put it back into the existing drawing, create a new drawing. Or I can create a new drawing. I can say create new drawing, and it asks us, okay, what is the create new drawing template? So if I click here to the right, I can select that template. So I'm going to use the one out of the box, AutoCAD Civil 3D Imperial. I'll hit open. I'm going to open up the blank drawing with that template. And then I can give it a name. I could override that name and call it, okay, this is actually EG or GIS EG. Okay, select the style. And I'll do the 1 and 5 background, which is basic existing. I'll click OK. All right. And it basically just cropped that area and brought it into a whole new drawing. And it takes a snapshot surface, a surface snapshot. I'm going to do a zoom extent, and there we go. Now it is linked back to that original file. It's kind of like a data shortcut, but it's not. If I come in here, turn off the data shortcuts, just put it on something random. Okay, so you see there's no data shortcuts in here. If I go to my surfaces and expand this, yes, and go into the surface property definition, you'll see it's actually a snapshot surface. Okay, but it still does allow me to make changes to the original file. So let's say you incorporated survey data into this file and you hit save. I'm going to hit save in here. And you get a notification that there is an update. I didn't actually change anything, but notice here the definition, it needs to be synced. So I'm going to rebuild the snapshot. And there we go. So this is just a different method. If you didn't want to use data shortcuts and create a boundary and create multiple boundaries, it's just another method you could use to extract areas from your crop surface. So this works great. I actually had a client that was doing even a golf course. I mean, a 600-acre golf course, and they brought in a lot of our surface. And they just wanted to focus on different areas throughout the phases of the project. So they built several crop surfaces and then brought it into each phase of the project. So, so hopefully, I don't know how many of you have actually used this product. Kind of curious. The actual feature here, crop surface. We got one, two. We got two people. So that's why I thought, there's quite a few people that forgot about it. I forgot about it for many years, and then I'm like, oh yeah. So I show this often to a lot of my clients and stuff. So it's a great tool. I like it, just being able to just extract something straight from a large survey. So most of you probably work on large surface projects, and you just want to extract certain phases. So you can do that. All right, the next tip I want to go over is the action recorder. So I'm going to come into maybe this drawing here. How many of you have actually used the action recorder? Kind of curious. Okay, we got one. Okay, got a few people. Okay, so if you go to the manage, it's a way to record commands and make it into a one-click option. So I'd shared one simple tip on our user group platform. If you've never been, we share tips all the time on there. And a good example is maybe running an audit and then maybe a purge or a dash purge or even a regen all and combining it into one command. So for example, under the manage tab, under the action recorder, if I hit record, it's going to record everything I inputted in. Now type in audit and say yes. And now do a dash purge. Type in reg apps. Enter. Use define current playback. Okay, I'm going to use it. Yeah, no, I don't want to go through each one. Okay, maybe I want to do a regen all afterwards. Okay, and then stop the recorder and give it a name. I might do like audit dash purge dash REA for regen all, and I'll click OK. So now I have this button here. So if I go back, maybe another drawing, I could use this same action recorder. Current settings. So, and it'll run through the commands. As you can see, it's going through all three commands at the same time. So if I go back up top, so there's the minus purge, there's the regen all, and then there's the audit up top here. So it's a good way to combine commands and turn it into a one-click command. Now, you can't use it. It's a little difficult when you start using something where you're selecting an object, then it gets really, really complicated. It's something you're not selecting. So let's figure an audit, a ridge all, a close. Maybe use that at the end of your design where you're about to close a drawing. So I might run an audit and then run a dash purge and then close, and you can just have it a one-click option. So it's a nice little tool to have. How many people actually created one before and use it actually, throughout their design, the actual recorder? Let's see if anybody online. Okay. I don't think anybody online has actually used one. So yeah, it's an old tool. It's actually an old tool, but this is one I've actually used for a while now. So I've been playing around trying to create other ones, maybe like creating a offset where I'm doing a bunch of offsets and creating detention ponds, like a simple detention ponds or building. So I'm trying to get creative with it. So but just want to show you some cool tools with the action recorder and stuff. So this is the one I typically use the most. Okay, let's move on. The next one I want to talk about is, let me see if I can find a good one. I'm going to pull up a file here. The volume dashboard. Let's see if it's in my save already. I can find it. Creating. I'm looking for a specific file here I could use. Space X-grade. Okay, I can use this one. Okay, so something that always comes up is calculating dirt volume for multiple stage subdivision, or even a big, large multifamily or commercial project. And they don't want to just keep creating boundaries. You create a boundary and you figure out what it is and you remove the boundary, or create a whole new surface and paste that one into another surface. And so you start creating multiple surfaces, right? And that's kind of the old way. So for example, in this subdivision, I want to break this out. I'm going to type in a PL for polyline. And I want to create earthwork analysis, temporary earthwork. And I'm just going to create a boundary over this right here. And let's just say this is phase one. Close it. I'm going to draw another one over here. And I'm going to encompass, maybe run it through here and through here. And I'm just making stuff up right now on the phasing. So, all right. And I'll come here and I need to close it. I'll close it. I'm just trying to encompass the faces here. And then I'll draw one more. I will come over here and make sure I get this one. This will be the remainder. Okay, and I'm going to follow along in here. The lines. That way it's actually enclosed. Oh, I think I had one more spot in here. I missed one right here. And we'll go back over here. And I'm not matching exactly. I just want to show you what you can do with a multi-phase earthwork analysis tool. And then I'll just close it here for now. And of course, I missed a spot over here. Okay, so I have three phases. I have this polyline for phase one, phase two, and phase three. They're all closed. Okay, and I'm going to go into the design center. Okay, and go into, I'm sorry, not design center, the volume dashboard. So if I go to analyze, volume dashboard. Okay, so I do have an earthwork already for the whole site already. Okay, this is my earthwork analysis. And just take note that this is preliminary. It's not taking account. It's actually including concrete thickness. Technically, you want to erase that concrete thickness out here outside your calculations. So I'm going to click on it. And on the fourth icon here, it says select bounded surface. And it's asking me to select the object. I'm going to select this polyline, the enclosed polyline. And it's going to create an expansion here. I'm going to click the box. And now you see it's giving me the earthwork just for that phase. Okay, there it is. Of course, you want to change that fill factor. You'll get that from Geotech. Maybe it's 1.1 or something. You never really should be using one to one, honestly, to me, my opinion. And then I can create another one. I'll click here and say Create bounded surface and select the other phase. Okay, and you should see it pop up underneath. There's the second one right there. And I'm going to just override the text here and call this one phase 1. This one phase 2. Okay, and I'll do a 1.1 and then one more. I'll click on bounded volume, select that last phase. Okay, it'll pop up phase 3. Okay, there we go. Check box and 1.1. Okay, now I have a volume for every phase in here. Now I did one a little more complicated. This for one of my clients was actually a construction contractor, and he was trying to calculate earthwork for all the phases, but per block and per road broken down. So every phase per road, every phase per block in the subdivision, then every detention pond. So I actually had a bunch of enclosed polylines everywhere, but he was able to get it all calculated in here and create a table and put it into the drawing. So to get more accurate numbers. Now, the cool thing about it is if we go to the surfaces, notice it's still just one surface. It's not creating all these multiple surfaces. You know, you don't want to go in there into a CAD drawing. You got 50 surfaces in there. You know, this is just a quick way to get a quick number for earthwork. Typically, sometimes maybe for the corridor, I might just lower it 6 inches for the corridor, and that will give me a more accurate number. Or you can create a datum surface to get a more accurate number. Create a datum surface for your corridor and include it into your phases. So, any questions? How many people actually do phasing earthwork like this little quick little analysis tool? Cool. We got one person, 2. Okay, good. Yeah, it's a nice tool. I'll do it all the time when I need to get something really quick and easy, and I'll just create some polygons. And then now, because back in the day, people are still going in here, copying, create a new surface. They'll paste in the PG and EG, and they'll create a bounded surface, and they'll just keep doing that for the multiple phases. Now you have all these surfaces in the drawing. So not that it's wrong, just gonna let you know, it's not that it's wrong. So, but all right, any questions? I guess I'll try to answer them a little bit here. I know we're kind of moving pretty fast. So let me go to the next tip I have. Part builder. All right. This is something I also get a lot of questions about in part builder. Let me just open up a blank drawing actually. We'll open up a Civil 3D builder. Part builder is something no one should get into unless you're really experienced in there. I don't recommend anybody going in there unless you know exactly what you're doing, because you can corrupt everybody's parts and stuff. So some of the questions that come up and that I get is, how do I change, add more part sizes and add maybe a range instead of just a certain amount? I can add a range. So I'll give you some tips, okay? But this is really for more of the CAD and BIM managers that are online, okay? So not for the techs coming in here. I don't want you going in there, but this is for those CAD managers and stuff. So those that don't get into part builder that much. So I'm going to go into my pipes pull down menu bar here and go to part builder. And I'll go, right now I'm just selecting what's actually in this CAD file. I'll select this catch basin. I'll hit modify. And we got this 3D part. And I'm going to go to the size parameters, right click and say edit value. So right now, what we have here is the inner structure width, which I can click and hit edit. And when I hit edit, I could add to the list. The only downsides I see about this is if you add something onto this, it won't put it in numerical order. So you'll have to completely delete it and reinsert it if you want it in numerical order that I've seen. I don't think I've seen it where somebody was able to fix it where it puts it back in numerical order if you add something like 54 after 144. But in here, I got all these sizes. Out of the box, you won't have this many sizes. You'll just hit add button. You hit the add button and add your size that you want. Now you do have other options besides just adding a list. You can add a range. So if I come in here, go to the value, go to parameter configuration. So for the inner structural width, it's got a list value, but I can come in here and say, well, I want to do a range. Okay. And I go back into SIW to the values and go back to the SIW, which is the inner structural width. Click in here and go edit the button right here. Here, I could type that range. Now here it's doing by 1 unit. So I can go from 15 to, 144 and a default, put a default and click OK. And now I have a range. Okay. So that's one way. You can do a range, maybe the pipes, not just a structure, you do a range for the pipes, or the inner structures here for this. You also have one more, back to configuration. So let's say I do walls and I do a table. Now, table means you're going to actually create a table based on the wall thickness, the diameter. It's something you're probably getting from the manufacturer. I don't do this too often. Most time I give it a range or I give it a list on there. But yeah, you can do a table to wall thickness. Let's go look at the values. Let's see, was it this here? Was it this one? I can't remember which one I did. I think it was this one. And I can create a new one in here if I wanted to. Here it is. So here I could say, okay, it's going to be 3 inches, 4 inches, and you so on. But typically it's much easier, besides building a table, is to do the range or the list. Now, once you get done, I recommend coming into the sorry, I went brain dead for that. Validate, run it, make sure it's not running errors, and then you can hit save as. Now, somebody did ask me, well, how do I remove that generic name, which I see all the time? People are still using the generic name for the actual parts in Civil 3D. So I won't leave my manhole be called eccentrical cone something out of the box. I'm going to call it eccentric sewer manhole. And this is where you do it right here. You can come in here, do a save as, okay, and change the name at the bottom, okay? And that's where you can change the name. That way it shows up as inlets, manholes, storm manholes, junction boxes, grease traps. You have to use the actual part name. So, all right. And you'll see it close and save and close. So like I said, this is strictly for CAD managers, BIM managers that actually fully understand the part builder. But this is a simple process. Just coming in here saying edit. I can edit and add my parts in here that are missing. So, and once you get done, you always want to double check. I'm hitting no here. The way I double check is I just come back, go to pipes, part edits, and I'll look at the part I just added. So let's say I did add a structure. This is where I was talking about that standard name. You can actually rename those. I'll come in and say edit to verify that this box comes up. If this box doesn't come, yeah, you got some problems now. It's just to let you know. So I always double check. Once I edit a box or any kind of structure, I'll come in and check it, do edit, and make sure that box comes up. Everything is there from the pull down list. And so maybe the box here, this is what I was messing around with. You can add more entities in there. Okay, let's move on. Kind of running out of time already. Okay. Let's talk about quarter intersections a little bit. I got a few minutes left here. I want to give a simple tip because I still see a lot of CAD manager designers that hate to use the intersection tool, and I've been using it since day one, daily. All my projects use intersection tools, okay? It's not the tool, like using it, it's when it goes wrong that most people hate it. They can't figure out what went wrong. And I have a class where I do problem solvings with intersections, maybe even roundabouts, cul-de-sacs and knuckles. And it's more of the frustration of why did it go wrong? And I know exactly where it always goes wrong with intersection tools. And this is my tip to those power users and CAD managers that refuse to use it and teach people not to use it when actually it's a good product. I will say it works 75% of the time. some drawings I get in, it works every single time, but sometimes it'll glitch out, and I'll show you where it does glitch out. So in this project here, I have an intersection tool, and most time you'll see something that it will target way over here, and this will go over here, and they're crossing each other, right? So I have to go look and see where did the targets go wrong. And 95% of the time, it's the curb return target that goes wrong. And so I typically will come in here, click on one of these curb returns and say edit targets, hover over this curb return. And what Autodesk does, or Civil 3 typically does, is it mistakenly will use maybe one of your back of curbs or your sidewalk and target those items in here instead of the curb return itself. So I usually have to come back and set this back to none and put those targets back up here. And that's the problem sometimes when it does go wrong. People don't understand that, hey, where did I go fix it? The first place they go, they'll see, I go to my quarter properties here, this massive list, and this is a short list. They'll see this big list and they're looking for their baseline. They're looking at that baseline in here. They'll go to edit, but that's the first place I go look at the curb return. That's usually the corporate that has this problem. I'll come in here and look at these. That there should be no targets on the sidewalks. It's going to be that curb return, and you want to look at those targets. And usually that's my tip. That usually resolves it 95% of the time, is that curb return targeting. It goes wrong, and that's usually the one you want to go focus on the very first step. When I was doing this course here, I think I had about 15 people. About 30 of them went perfect. Then the other 2, it went wrong. It was that curb return just kind of glitched out because we're using the same file, but it then kind of glitched out. So let's see here. Okay. Let's see what else. I got one more tip. I'm running out of time here already. Rename structure and parts. So usually sometimes I get a request, hey, how do you rename multiple parts? So let me find one. Grading, looking for next util base. Let me just go browse for one. Go into an actual design drawing and go open this up. Okay. I'll put this on one screen. Still loading. Okay. All right, let me go to one view here. And some companies, their standard is to name the manholes as structures by numbers like SSM1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you don't have it preset in your templates already, they want to know, how do I change this number to just say SSMH 1, 2, 3, 4. So there is a way to do that. If you go to modify, this is a very simple tip, my last tip of the day. If I go into rename parts, okay, and I'm going to come in here to the template tool. I'm going to call it SSMH dash, and then I'll say the counter, enter. I'm going to start with one here. Actually, I need to actually label more than just one. I need to select more than just one manhole. So I'm going to select them in order. It's going to renumber them by the order I select here. And here, now let's go back. Modify, rename parts, go to the template here to the right, and I'll say SSMH dash counter. Insert one, okay. and then I'll say rename existing part. Yes. Start number 1. If there was pipes, but I'm not going to rename the pipes. Just doing the structures. Okay, and then when I click on it, you'll see this was 4. That's 3, and it's renaming the name, not the description. Just so make sure the clarification there that I'm not renaming the description. I'm actually just renaming the actual name, not the description. You see here that my description still says standard 5-foot diameter SSMH, but the part number here SSM2. So that's a simple way to just rename manholes and stuff. So now I'll stop here. So because we have another one, we actually have another structure jumping on right now, and I will let him take over. And our guest is Rob. So Rob, you may close here, stop sharing. I'll let you share. And thank you everyone for watching and attending. So I'm going to let him go ahead and get started. Okay, Rob, let me know if you can share your screen and introduce yourself. And I will turn off the camera.
All right, can you hear me okay, Tony?
Yeah, yes.
Awesome. Share my screen.
For those online, go ahead and raise your hand if you can hear them.
There was a message that came in, Tony, that the chat needs to be enabled.
Okay.
So
Okay, let me see if I can turn that on.
yeah, so I'll get going while you're doing that, okay?
Okay.
All right, thanks. Well, thanks for having me on, and welcome everybody. So this session for the next 30 minutes is going to be on additional Civil 3D tips and tricks. I think I have like 45 tips and tricks to share with you. So it's all in PowerPoint, so we can kind of blow through these really quickly, and then I'll be happy to share this slide deck with anybody that wants it, if you want to use it as a reference. So we have multiple tips and tricks, some basic, some more advanced things. So let's get going. So my name is Rob Sinclair. I'm not going to read through all this stuff, but I'm a fellow Autodesk expert elite like Tony and many others that you're going to hear from today. I'm actually from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work for a company called Wade Trim. I'm actually in our Michigan office today, but you know, all things Civil 3D, drones, reality capture, my FAA Part 107 pilot, also the president of the Pittsburgh Civil 3D user group, and regularly do trainings around Civil 3D, InfoWorks, Pix4D, and many other softwares. So if you want to stay on and join me for the next session, I'm going to be talking about Autodesk Recap as well. So brief intro, we're going to dive into Civil 3D tips and tricks, and then if we have time, we'll do a Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to throw that in the question and answer panel. So real quick, company I work for is Wade Trim. Actually been with this company for about 10 months now. We have 650 employees, 21 offices. Like I mentioned, I'm in the Pittsburgh office, but we have offices kind of all over the eastern side of the US. So, all right, let's dive in. I think most everybody knows what a surface is, but I wanted to kind of lay the foundation here. You know, what is a surface? So in the context of survey and civil design, generally refers to a TIN, which is a triangulated irregular network surface. The important point I want to make here is all surface operations happen on the triangulation, those TIN lines. So if you have bad triangulation, you're going to get bad results. You know, so the underlying data that makes up that surface has to be good, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So ideally, we want to build our surfaces with break lines and or points. So when you do that, you know, you're going to have a much cleaner surface. It's going to be more accurate, more precise. Your drawings are going to perform better. And if you look here, this drawing was made with break line data. It has 60,000 triangles in it. If you take that same data set and build it with contours, you could see the triangle count basically triples. and it creates a much more inaccurate surface. The surface is larger when you do grading operations. It's going to be a lot slower. If you do earthwork calculations, it's going to be inaccurate. And you can kind of see this in the next two slides that I'll show you here. So this is the surface that's defined from break lines. Cut a cross section here at this high point of this roadway. You can see how defined and uniform the triangulation is. And when we look at the cross section, you can see the crown, the curve, and the shoulders of that roadway. If we take that same data set and build it with contours, you lose all that information. So you lose the definition of the road. You're losing that high point because it's interpolating between the contours. And the tip here is, I would avoid building a surface from contours unless it's an absolute last resort. It's very, very inaccurate. I know a lot of the engineering folks that I deal with throughout my career, they still want to use contours to build surfaces because they don't like the way that the Civil 3D contours are created or displayed. They complain about jaggedy contours or squiggly contours. And my tip here is, if you have contours that don't look the way you want them to, more than likely the underlying data that you're using to create that is not correct. So kind of go back to the drawing board and look at your corridor definition, your feature lines, your grading objects. It could be the settings in those. So keep that in mind when we move forward. The engineers are all about looking at the presentable plan, how the contours look on the plan. But, we are more concerned about the underlying surface. We want that to be intact so that we can send this surface model out for machine control or automated machine guidance and make sure that it's correct when we move forward. So going to dive into some examples of some bad practices or examples of what not to do. We want to be cognizant of our surface definitions. When we add things to our surfaces, every time we add something, it's going to add another line item in that surface definition. These commands here that I have highlighted on the right, I would avoid those at all costs. I've been doing this for 25 years. You've been using Civil 3D since 2005, and I've never had to use those to create a surface. So try to avoid those if you can. What happens is when you do these manual edits to your surface, it's going to add another line item. You're going to see this red mark here next to this. And when you regenerate your surface, it has to go through each one of these one by one. And if it doesn't exist in the drawing, it still has to try to process that. So, there's some tips on how to clean up your surface definition. But, one thing that I ran into here is one of the drawings I got into at my previous company had a surface definition that was 38, 8.5 by 11 pages long. So when you printed it out. And then I came across a new world record, which is this list here on the left, which ended up being 135 pages when you printed it out. So, think about that second person, that next person up that's going to get into your drawing, and make sure you keep it clean and concise and well organized so that they could hop in and pick up kind of where you left off. So like I mentioned, avoid those 6 items. You can, in your template, you can minimize or eliminate the use of those. So under your definition of your surface style in your template, you can change under edit operations. You could say no to all of those so that even if people use them, it's not going to be built in the surface. Also, another thing to be aware of here is minimize flat areas. So if you do add contour data, depending on your settings in your template, minimize flat areas will get added to your surface definition. So every time you add a contour, you'll get another instance of this. And this could cause problems because if you look at this one here, it adds points to flat triangle edges. So it's interpolating data, adding that interpolated data to your surface. And then if you start adding break lines after that, that interpolated point data will still be in your surface and it may not be functioning the way you want it to function. Could be confusing to a lot of people, but just check your surface definition See if you have multiple instances of minimized flat areas. You could just right click on each one, hit remove from definition, have one left in there, and that should be right above your boundary. So you could use these arrows here to rearrange the order of operations inside of your surface definition. Another thing, definitely use Object Viewer. Object Viewer is a great thing. You can identify spikes or holes in your surface. If you do see a hole in your surface, in an instance like this, if our design teams would come in, create a proposed surface right here, and then calculate earthwork quantities, depending on how they do that, that could calculate that earthwork all the way down to elevation 0. I ran into a project where we had a 40,000 cubic yard bust because of hole in the surface. And I have a note here about existing buildings. Sometimes we'll put a surface mask on an existing building just to not show the contours going through that. And, that could also put a hole in your surface. So, try to approximate the finished floor, add a break line to that building, and make sure your surface is entirely complete so that you don't run into earthwork issues in the future. Under file size and data management, monitor your file size. If you're having issues in your drawing, that's a good indicator if something's going wrong. Also, with your Civil 3D volumes, consider placing those volumes in a separate drawing. You can see this example here. There was 2 volume surfaces in this file. It was 28 megabytes. Just by removing those volumes, it dropped the file down to 11 megabytes. So, you could create a separate volume drawing and data reference your existing and your proposed file into that volume drawing and do all your calculations there. This is a really great tip. A lot of people don't know about this one. It's not documented and it's kind of hidden in Civil 3D. So, you could create a volume surface. If you use the volume dashboard, it also creates a volume surface. But this command you can only get to by typing it in. It's called report surface volume. It opens up the panorama window and allows you to do a quick calculation of your existing and proposed surface and does not create that volume surface. So it keeps your file size small. And as soon as you close this dialog box, this calculation goes away. So kind of a quick calculator for volume calculations. A land XML file, this is the ideal way to transfer data between design software. So, Civil 3D to Bentley products, you name it. Land XML is a universal file format that can be transferred between all these different programs. So definitely use that if you can. Real quick on coordinates in CAD, the deprecation of the US survey foot was effective January 1st, 2023. It basically got retired. And, last year, January 2nd or 3rd, whenever we came back to work, LinkedIn was blowing up with posts about this, saying that the US survey foot's retired, no longer use it. And that is not the case. If your project is set up in a US survey foot coordinate system, you should still continue to use that until the new datums are released. The new datums are probably coming out later this year, maybe even in 2025. At that point, the entire country will be on an international foot unit of measure. And I'll talk a little bit more about this during the next session if you're interested. So actually, AutoCAD didn't introduce the US survey foot measurement until version 2017. So be aware of that if you do have to export a file back to a version before 2017. Surface boundaries. This is another one that a lot of people kind of struggle with, is the difference between destructive and non-destructive. So you can see when you add a surface boundary and outer boundary, you have this non-destructive break line unchecked, and you can see the blue boundary here. The data stops, where the data stops. Really, it does not extend out to that boundary. So if you have that turned on, it will actually extend out and interpolate that data all the way out to that boundary line. So to me, I'd rather have this unchecked. and run it that way versus having interpolated data that is inaccurate. So another good tip here is if you added it incorrectly, so you have this checked and you're like, oh, dang, I wanted to have it the other way. You could go into your surface definition, remove it, re-add it, which is a multiple step process, or you could just delete it and use the oops command. So the oops command will delete that line and bring that line back in as a new object inside of Civil 3D. So it will automatically remove it from any definition that you have in your software, and then you can add it back in using the other setting. So oops is different than undo. Undo would bring that back and add it back to the surface definition. So this is a great way to clean up, that, order of operations in your surfaces. So if you constantly adding break lines and you have a list of 20 break lines, you could just delete all your break lines, use the oops command to bring it back in, and then add that to your surface definition as one item. So it's a good tip to kind of keep everything consolidated. So QAing the data. I mentioned object viewer. I use that all the time. Anytime you're working with surfaces, you could toggle on your tin line and your style. You could also look at your surface statistics, look at your minimum, maximum elevation, your mean elevation, make sure those are all within reason. Quick profile is another good one. If you just draw a polyline through your surface, select that polyline and right click, there's a quick profile option that you could look at a quick section. Surface analysis is another good one. So you can do slopes or user contours, slope arrows, look at elevation data. It's a really good one to kind of QA your data. Bad geometry. So this is the #1 cause of Civil 3D crashes is bad geometry. So, and it starts with our layout plan. So, it looks good from really far out, this radius is 16 feet, but if you start diving in, it's actually 15.97. There was a dimension override there because whoever designed this didn't know how to do that correctly. And you can see that that's non-tangent geometry there. So if we copied that into our grading file and created a feature line from that and used a grading object, that will cause crashes. It might be today, next week, or next year, but you'll open that file and your gradings will crash. You might open that drawing and all your grading disappears. And usually that's because of bad geometry. I can't express that enough. That is the #1 cause of Civil 3D crashes and issues. So make sure that is fundamentally good geometry, using basic AutoCAD techniques to get that accomplished. Smooth surfaces. This again, back to the squiggly contours, engineers don't like that. So, your underlying data that builds your surface is going to cause that squiggly or not, good looking contours. So consider where your break lines are, corridor frequencies. There's so many different things that go into this. There is basically a simplify surface command or smooth contour command in your surface style and actually under your surface edits. But when you introduce that to your drawing, it's going to slow things down. Sometimes, it's going to get 10 times slower. So be cognizant of when and where you use that smooth surface commands. But, it can make things look better, as you see here from this middle image to the right image, but it does make your performance suffer if you have that enabled. Drawing cleanup tools. I know Tony mentioned this, but can't express this enough. Run this often on your drawings. Purge, dash purge, and audit. You want to, when you do dash purge, use the red japs. Also in the purge dialog box, make sure you have this orphan data checkbox on. So that will purge like orphan data from like MicroStation, DGN line styles and things like that could really cause havoc on your drawings. Input search delay. So this is another one that is kind of an annoyance to most users. Is you type a command and you hit enter and it calls out a different command, not the one you intended, because of the kind of selection that it's prompting here. So The default is 300 milliseconds. So I found that 750 is a really good sweet spot. So that's a good thing. And you can just change that system variable. All right, another good one here is, if you right click on the drawing tab that you have open, these two buttons here, copy full file path and open file location. So open file location will take you in the Windows File Explorer where that drawing is. So you don't have to navigate through multiple levels of directory to go where that drawing is. Also, copy full file path. If you need to send a link to a coworker, copy the full file path, paste it in an email, and they have a link exactly where that drawing resides on your server. If your CAD's frozen, this works more times than not. I mean, probably 98, 99 out of 100 times, Civil 3D gets locked up. Hit Control Alt Delete, but immediately hit Escape when you come to the screen. A lot of people go Control Alt Delete, they hit Task Manager, and for some reason that never works, but you hit Control Alt Delete, hit Escape at this blue screen, and that unfreezes Civil 3D a lot of times. If you're doing that through a remote desktop session, I know a lot of us working remotely, we might be remoted into a machine. That same command works, but it's Control Alt End to do that through a remote desktop session. So this is one of the really powerful tool. I actually learned about it at Autodesk University many, many years ago, but it's kind of hidden. So it's under the Analyze ribbon, under Ground Data, Minimum Distance Between Surfaces. This is a really powerful one that will help you find the intersection of two surfaces. So basically that zero line. And this is good if you have an existing slope and you're putting an outparcel in with a 2% grade that's tying into an existing slope. You can find that exact intersection of where that ties in and then extract that, add that as a break line to your surface. Drawing cleanup tools, we talked about purge and audit and all that good stuff, but built into Civil 3D is a tool called Map Clean. Map Clean allows us to, do a lot more thorough cleanup of our data in our drawings. So, excuse me, consider that. That's a good one. Overkill is a really old school AutoCAD command that you can use. This has been around for a long time. I would say just be careful with this one. Maybe create a copy of your drawing to make sure it doesn't, overly clean the items that you're trying to clean, but that's another good one to try if you're running into issues. Another good way to diagnose drawing issues is go into your drawing, hit Control A to select all, and you could go into your properties palette and you could look at this item here where it says no selection. It will highlight everything that's in your drawing. And let's say you have 150 grading groups showing up in that list, but you only see 1 or 2 in your drawing. So obviously there's some ghosted grading objects in there that you can clean up using this quick select function. So you can pick the entire drawing, select properties, and you can just select whatever those objects are and then figure out if you want to delete those or whatever. Really helpful tip there to diagnose drawing issues. E-transmit is probably one of the best ways to send out a lot of files. We can dumb down our Civil 3D intelligent data by changing this file format to with exploded AEC objects that will dumb all the Civil 3D stuff down to just basic AutoCAD entities. So this will do an entire sheet set, entire folder, whatever. It will package it all up at one time and just save you a lot of time to package that up and send it out to another consultant. If you want to do one drawing, the export C3D drawing does a very similar thing as e-transmit, but it's good for one drawing at a time. This is another tool that a lot of people are not aware of, the Civil Engineering Data Translator app. So this will allow you to convert GeoPack and inroads data to Civil 3D and vice versa. So you can upload this to the cloud, run the conversion. It uses cloud credits, usually the cloud, like 10 or 12 cloud credits. So $10 or $12 per conversion. Does a pretty decent job. Few apps here to help manage XRFs and data shortcuts. These are accessible in your Windows Start menu. So the reference manager and data shortcut editor, if you need to globally change XRF paths or data shortcut paths, these are two great apps to use to do that. A newer Civil 3D feature line command that was introduced a couple versions ago, but if you have crossing feature lines and you want to add a PI to that feature line, essentially, you can select this button here under the Edit Geometry panel and select Insert Points at Crossing Locations, and it will insert those PI points. Tip here, plug for Jeff and Jerry Bartles here. Great resource for everybody out there, the Civil Immersion blog. So this is the website there. Subscribe to their newsletter. Lots of great content. They do these 30-minute workout sessions and provide a lot of great information. So definitely, if you haven't signed up for this, I highly recommend this as a resource. So got a few minutes left. That's it for the first session. So thanks everybody for jumping in with us. And there's my contact info. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My email's there. If you want a copy of the slide deck, feel free to drop me a note. I'll be happy to send it to you. So any questions out there, Tony? Tony, you're muted if you're
Sorry, yeah, somebody did ask if you can, share the slideshow. So if you want to reach out or message Rob, he can, or email Rob, he can share this slideshow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right. I think that's only really questions that came in. So yeah, great, awesome, great tips and stuff. So really enjoyed it. If you don't know, he's doing the next session. So I'm going to try to post a schedule here. Some people are asking where's the schedule. I don't know. I forgot to check to see if the registration page showed you a schedule, but I'll try to post it on here, the schedule. So, all right. So I'll let Rob do the next session.
Flip over here. All right, so want to give it a minute for folks to hop on this new time, or just go ahead and go?
Yeah, just give it 2 or 3 more minutes. Yeah, and let everyone get a chance to log in. I'm gonna see if I can send an email to everyone that registered.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily like using PowerPoint to do presentations. I like diving in and doing the software hands-on, but I just had so much content I wanted to share with everybody that I thought PowerPoint would be the way to go today.
Yeah, where's everybody? If you want to put on the chat, logging in from. Love to see where everyone's coming from. I'm in Dallas, Texas. Got some Austin, Maryland, Bill, Southeast Texas. There you go. Jersey, yeah. Lots of Texas. That's Virginia. Mexico, yep. I do recognize some of our members. Rob, if you recognize anybody from your user group online.
Yeah, a lot of familiar names out there.
Yeah. Let's see.
Good stuff. Nobody from Pennsylvania.
Uh-oh. Turkey, yeah, we got Turkey. There we go. Dallas, Iowa. And just to let everyone know, people are going to be logging in off and on throughout today's 7 AR session. Some people are just logging in specific to their software.
Michelle's 10 minutes from PA.
There you
Close
go.
enough.
Close enough. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. So.
All right, let's get on with it here. So.
Okay.
All right. So next up, we have the Autodesk Recap tips and tricks. So Recap is a really cool software that's in the Autodesk AEC collections that you all have access to. So we'll dive right in. And that picture you see there, I spent 2 weeks, two different 2-week stints in Italy doing reality capture projects, digital kind of historic preservation. So it's a Roman amphitheater in Volterra, Italy. You can see the scanner there off to the right. So we did some really cool things over there. We'd love to present to you all like all the cool projects we did over there if you all are interested at some point. So great project to be a part of, and I'm actually going back this April for another 2-week stint. So definitely pretty awesome stuff. So again, in case there's new people on the call, brief intro of me, Rob Sinclair, corporate technology lead for Wade Trim. So I'm based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Our company is actually headquartered in Detroit, Michigan. So I have over probably 25 years experience now in civil infrastructure, survey, reality capture, drones, all that good stuff around technology in the civil infrastructure field. Also president of the Pittsburgh Civil 3D User Group. So we kind of do a similar thing in Pittsburgh that you all are doing with the Dallas Fort Worth group. A fellow Autodesk expert elite like Tony and many others that you're going to hear from today. So definitely a great group to be a part of for sure. So we're going to focus on recap kind of tips and tricks, but this is more civil focused. A lot of this could be used on, the architectural and Revit side as well. But since my background is in civil, we're going to focus on that for the next 25 minutes or so. I want to dive in a little more in this session about coordinate systems and CAD. I can't stress the importance of this. This is something that's a big problem in our industry, and a lot of people don't understand this. So I want to try to simplify this as best I can. But, there was an announcement made January 1st, 2023, that the deprecation of the US survey foot was going to get retired. A lot of our states are different. Like some states are US survey foot and some states are international foot. But once the new datum comes out, it's called the 2022 datum. It's going to come out later this year or early 2025. Those new datums are going to be international foot only. So all 50 states will be international foot. That doesn't mean US survey foot's going to go away. Any project that's currently set up and established in US survey foot will remain that way for the entire life cycle of that project. So you don't want to go in and change your drawing units and settings whenever this datum comes out, or you're going to cause all kinds of problems. So if you ever had an issue where a project was shifted by 3 to 5 feet, some states it's a lot bigger, more than likely it was a discrepancy between US survey foot and international foot. So you can see the map here is state legislation, Texas, Pennsylvania, where I'm at is the US survey foot state. I'm actually in our Michigan office today. So Michigan is an international foot state. So very few states are international foot, most are US survey foot. So consider that when you're setting up your templates. When I got to Wade Trim where I'm at now, our headquarters and a lot of our offices are in Michigan. So our template was set to international foot, but we do a lot of work in Texas and Pennsylvania and Florida. And all those projects were set up using the wrong unit of measure. So created a lot of issues, and we're still trying to fix some of them. So that drawing unit setting, you can type units in Civil 3D, AutoCAD, whatever program you're using, and you can change that unit setting here, or it's also controlled by the INS unit setting. So INS units of 21 is US survey feet, INS units of 2 is international feet. So just be aware of that. And this is what can happen. So these drawings, so I have a drawing set in US survey feet that has a northing of 500,000, easting of 2 million. I have a drawing in the opposite, one's US survey foot, one's international foot. So you go into each one of those drawings individually, identify a point, you get the exact same coordinate value. When you XREF those together or insert one as a block, that's where that shift is going to happen. So that shift will cause a 1 foot shift in the northing and a 4 foot shift in the easting. So it's actually applying a scale factor. So the difference between US survey foot and international foot, one goes out 8 decimal places, one goes out 4 decimal places. So a scale factor is applied. And the only way you could see that scale factor is if you set your units in your template to at least 6 decimal places. If you have it set to 4, which is typically the default, you'll never see that. So on the left is the default, on the right, bumped it up, and you can see the scale was 0.999998. If you had the inverse of that, it would be 1.000002. So it's a good tip there to make sure that's enabled. Autodesk Recap, you know, a lot of folks have never used this or don't even know what Autodesk Recap is. So it's really a program that allows us to manage and process laser scanning data, photogrammetry data, and get it into other Autodesk software applications. You know, AutoCAD, Revit, you know, 3ds Max, you know, primarily I'm going to be talking about Civil 3D today, but you know, it's something that is necessary to take that reality capture data and get it into any other Autodesk application. So in Recap, we have 2 options. We can actually import a point cloud, so an LAS to RCP file, and that could be from terrestrial laser scanners, mobile laser scanners, aerial LiDAR. And then you also have an option to do photo to 3D. So that's actually taking photogrammetry. It could be ground-based photogrammetry using your iPhone. It could be aerial photogrammetry from a drone, and you can process the data in Recap. So one misconception that people have is they see a point cloud and they automatically assume it's LiDAR data, but photogrammetry also produces a point cloud. So it can be confusing of where that source of information came from. When we import this point cloud data, you know, there's various file types that we can bring into Recap. So from all your normal software vendors like Leica, Faro, Regal, Topcon, and so on, you can import those in, lots of different formats there. But the goal here is we need to get that data converted to an RCP or RCS format. So a recap project or a recap scan. And that's what the Autodesk applications are going to read to bring into the software. So in Recap, when we open Recap, we want to make sure we assign the coordinate system. And that's why I wanted to talk about the units. So it's very, very important to assign the coordinate system. Sometimes it will automatically read the EXIF data from wherever your data source came from and populate the coordinate system. You also want to go to the settings tab here under general and make sure you're in the proper unit of feet, US survey feet or international feet. So those 2 are very important to make sure this data, you know, comes in the right spot. When we talk about drone data processing in Recap, you know, a lot of people use Pix4D and other methods. You know, Recap works very well, you know, and it's included in our AEC subscription. So, you know, if you haven't used it to process drone data, give it a shot. You know, you don't have a lot of the high-end editing tools that you have in these other programs, but if you just need a real simple, you know, photogrammetry processing workflow, Recap might be a good option. So you can apply your ground control. So you can import your text file or CSV file from the surveyors. It will bring in the northing and easting of your ground control points. And then you can set those ground control points just like you can in other software. So you could zoom in, pick the center of those points. You have to tag that in at least, you know, 3 to 5 images. And quick tip here, like if you are doing drone work, these arrow points are awesome. They are solar powered GPS enabled targets that you can lay around on your site and give you corrected locations. You know, we typically shoot those in using conventional survey just as a double check anyway, but those things are awesome. So you do that, you set all your ground control points, and then you hit process, and it's going to actually upload all that data to the cloud, and it's going to process in the Autodesk cloud, and then you'll get an email when that data is ready to be downloaded. So once it's uploaded, you could shut down your computer and you don't have to let it process locally because it's in the cloud. You'll download that data set and then work in Recap with that data set. You know, classification is always a big topic of discussion. You know, there's all kinds of automatic classification routines out there with various software vendors. None of them are perfect. Most of them will get you 95% of the way there, but none of them are perfect, like I mentioned. So Recap just introduced this very recently. Before this, there was no classification routines within Autodesk Recap. You had to go into some other software to do this. So in the main menu here in Recap, there's actually an automatic ground classification, and you could pick optimal, more detail, or custom or less detail. Get you close, maybe 95% of the way there, like I mentioned. There's also a manual classification now. So you could start with automatic and then flip over to manual to clean up anything that the Recap algorithm missed. So you basically just pick a window around those points and then reclassify those the way you want them to be. So once you get all that done, you get it all classified, you know, you save that Recap project, and then you're ready to hop into Civil 3D. So open Civil 3D, start a drawing with your template, assign a coordinate system that matches the coordinate system the Recap project's in. And then you, just like you attach an XREF, you go to your XREF reference manager, select attach point cloud. Then once that point cloud comes in, it takes a little bit of time for it to display. You just select that point cloud and you could create surface from point cloud from the contextual ribbon. Once you select that, it's going to walk you through a wizard to name your surface, pick whatever style you want. This area right here, this throws people off a little bit because it's like this data set that I'm working with had 12.9 million points. And it's like, do you really need all of that data? Probably not, but you know, Civil 3D and Recap can handle that. I've had data sets in the trillions of points and it handled it. So it takes a long time to process, but it did it without crashing. So you can do a couple things in this dialog box. You can change the distance between points, but depending on your project, you might not want to reduce that down too much because you'll lose definition in that data. So you got to find that balance. But another cool thing here is you can use these buttons up here. So if you had a flat, wide open site, you know, you could pick a polygon around that flat area and say, I want to point every 10 feet. But where you have slopes or ditches, channels, other things like that that you need to be more accurate, you can leave those with this default spacing. So those are really good tools there. This filter here, filtering method, you know, I've tried to use planar average and Kriging interpolation many times, and does not work very well in my opinion. So I would say classify your point cloud in Recap or another program, and always build your surface with the no filter option. So what the planar average does, it tries to take your high points and your low points and creates an average of those. So It's going to take into consideration buildings, cars, trees, you know, if there's people in your scan. Really, it's not going to give you a good result. I've not had luck with this one, or Kriging interpolation. Kriging interpolation tries to create that ground surface, that bare earth ground surface, that what essentially what we're after. We want that bare earth ground surface for our civil engineering teams or our survey teams. You know, the only way I found to get to that accurately and efficiently is to classify that in some other software using those automatic algorithms or within Recap, and then cleaning it up manually using this no filter option. So once you do that, it's going to process the surface. Depending on how much data you have, it could take a minute, it could take 10 minutes. So you'll get a message here in the lower right corner that is processing in the background. You can still continue to work, and then once it's ready to go, that surface will appear in your drawing. One tip that I don't have a slide for, but one tip: once that surface appears in your drawing, it's automatically going to put you in a 3D wireframe view. And you know, you're going to notice a lot of lagging and slowness when you're trying to pan and zoom, because it has to be in the 3D wireframe view to display the point cloud. But once you have the surface, you don't have to see the point cloud anymore. So you could switch that back to 2D. Your point cloud won't be displayed, but it's going to be a lot more responsive. Once that point cloud comes into Civil 3D, you know, ideally, we just want to take the ground and maybe the paving classifications and build our ground surface from that. We don't care about the vegetation, cars, anything like that. So there's really no good way within Civil 3D itself to only focus on those classifications. So we have to use this Autodesk Map. Autodesk Map is a full-blown GIS application built into Civil 3D. So you can open up the map task pane, and it will open up this on, you know, the left or right hand side of your screen. And you could go to your display manager tab, select data, and then add point cloud data from drawing object. When you do that, it's going to allow you to select just the classifications that you want to display. And it'll show that on the screen, and then you could build the surface from just those classifications. You know, really powerful tool there. If you were not aware of that. So once all that's done, you know, once your surface is built, you know, we want to review our data, make sure we have accurate quality data. So we want to bring in our ground control shots. You know, we can import that CSV file as COGO points. We should also have check shots across our project. And we want to compare that, you know, compare that check shot to our actual surface elevation to make sure it's within our tolerance. You'd see this one is off by about just over 100th. You know, these ones are pretty close too. And this is a great way to identify, you know, did we screw up and select the wrong coordinate system, the wrong unit of measure, you know, any other thing that could go wrong. This is really where you can nail that down and make sure you have good quality data. So Autodesk InfoWorks, you know, had a lot of these tools that are starting to get migrated into Autodesk Recap now. So just a quick plug for Autodesk InfoWorks. You know, there are some great tools in there that can be used that are not in Recap yet. So you bring in your point cloud file and you can do a bunch of different things in InfoWorks. If you haven't checked that out, you know, I think it's worth a look. Something that was introduced recently in Autodesk Recap Pro is the linear feature extraction. So this does require you to upload your data to the Autodesk Construction Cloud, because this tool is only available in the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So to upload that from the main menu here, you select this Publish button. You have to have a project set up in ACC, upload that point cloud, then you would go into the web interface and open that point cloud to get to this function. So basically this is great for extracting like curb and gutter lines and maybe retaining walls and things like that. You know, you could create a template and it will automatically kind of push that template through, and then you can extract those lines as 3D polylines or feature lines to use in Civil 3D. On the image side of things, whenever you're processing drone data through Recap, you're going to get a high resolution JPEG or TIFF file. So, those are very, very large. You could see one here, it's 2 gigabytes in size. Sometimes Civil 3D won't even pull that image in. It's too large. Windows won't even open that image. So the most effective and efficient image format within Civil 3D is a SID file. So you can see the SID file is a fraction of the size of the TIFF file. The only way to get to a SID file that I know of is you have to use a software called GeoExpress. So you take that TIFF, you run it through here, it does the conversion and creates that SID. And it's so much more efficient and effective in the Autodesk platform. So definitely recommend using SIDs as much as you can. GeoExpress, there obviously is a fee to it. You buy cartridges, and then based on your usage, it kind of takes off the cartridge, and then buy a new cartridge once you run out. The other cool thing about a SID file is the geolocation information is embedded in that SID file. I can't tell you how many times that somebody sent me a TIFF and they forget to send this world file or correlation file along with it. So typically TIFFs and JPEGs have a world file that has to go with that for it to be geo-referenced correctly. A couple of things here, around Autodesk Map. We can bring in geo-referenced imagery using the map insert command. There is a known bug that I've been preaching to Autodesk about to get fixed, that if you are in a US survey foot coordinate system, the map insert command does not recognize that yet. So your image is going to come in scaled exponentially large. So you have to temporarily set your units to unitless, bring the image in, and then set it back to US survey foot. It works fine if it's set to international foot. It's just that US survey foot setting. Map import allows you to bring in shapefile data, other GIS data, and then the map W space that we talked about to use to filter the point cloud by classification. Map query is another great one. So kind of through that map task pane, if you need to translate data from one coordinate system to another, even one unit to another, you can use the map query function and basically translate that data. It doesn't work really well for Civil 3D data, but the object data that creates the Civil 3D data, it works fine for. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to translate a Civil 3D drawing. You might have to move the underlying data and then rebuild whatever it is that you're trying to build, corridor, surface, anything like that. All right, so introduced in Recap Pro 2022 actually was a scan to mesh function. So this was around way back in the day in Recap. They got rid of it and then brought it back in. So it could take a point cloud. So here's that Roman theater that I mentioned. And the scan to mesh function is under this cloud icon, and you select scan to mesh. You can see this data set was 1.77 billion points, lots and lots of data. It takes 40 cloud credits, so basically $40, and you publish this to the cloud, processes it, and then you get a mesh that looks like this. So did a pretty good job. This mesh can be used and you could push this out to Unity, Unreal, Twinmotion, 3D Studio, all kinds of different applications. So really powerful tool there if you're doing that high-end, visualization kind of stuff. So another cool thing that you can use Recap for, if you have one of the new iPhone Pros with LiDAR, you can go out and capture things using LiDAR photogrammetry. It could be an object, it could be, whatever, and process that through Recap. So I did a quick scan of my driveway. I was looking to see where the water was running off, low points. So literally walked around my driveway in less than 2 minutes, captured all that data, processed it in Recap, took measurements, went out there with a tape measure just to verify the accuracy, and it was pretty accurate for, you know, less than a 2-minute scan. So really powerful what we can do with LiDAR and photogrammetry that's in most of our pockets now. Pretty awesome stuff. Another tip here, you know, when we are talking about processing LiDAR and photogrammetry, sometimes we want to get all the planimetrics from that data into AutoCAD. You know, you can insert that aerial, you can digitize everything, but that's a lot of work. Had a lot of success with this Airworks platform. You know, you can upload your drone or LiDAR data to this platform, and it will basically put all the content on your standard layers, and it uses AI. They have multiple patents around this technology. It's very clean data. Geometry is correct, and you know, it takes a fraction of the time. You know, it's really, cost benefit is like $20 an acre. So if you have a high density project like this, you know, it's probably going to take $150 an acre if you had somebody in your office do it. So a really cool program there. You know, a couple words of caution here. You know, if you are working in a US survey foot drawing, keep in mind that the W block command and the export civil 3D drawing command writes out to the default out of the box AutoCAD template. And that out of the box AutoCAD template is set to international foot. So if you W block something out and just send it off, that means that unit of measure is now incorrect. So simple fix, you just need to open it, verify that unit, switch it back to US survey feet, save the drawing, and then send it out. But I've seen a lot of times that that's affected projects during construction. So again, US survey foot was introduced in 2017. So if you need to export out to a prior version, it's going to default to INS units of 2, which is international foot. All right, and that's it for that presentation. Again, I'm happy to share this with you all if you're interested. So we got a few minutes left. Any questions, Tony?
We did have one question about somebody had, let's see if I can find it here. They had a large number of millions of points and want to know how to reduce it. And so I just kind of told them exactly when you were explaining how you can reduce your points and recap.
Yep. There's simplify tools and recap. There's also simplify surface routine and civil 3D, which doesn't always work that well.
Yeah.
And really, when you import that point cloud, those kind of polygon areas where you can decimate the points by area, that's probably the best route to go for that. Yeah.
You were also talking about bringing in large aerial imageries. The question was asked, you know, does Nearmap create SID files? I don't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I think they're JPEG or TIFF, so you would have to download that and then convert it in GeoExpress. GeoExpress owns the rights to that SID format, so I think they're the only software vendor that'll allow you to convert it.
Okay. Okay. Great presentation. Really good stuff. Really good stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
A lot of
thanks
tips.
for the invite. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Appreciate it. And so our next presenter is David. David, are you online? He's going to be going over Revit and the ACC. So let's see. David Butts. Any questions while we're waiting for David to jump online?
I see David in the chat. Or
yeah, he's on the chat.
I think he probably needs to join with the panelist.
Let's see if I can make him a presenter. Promote to panelist. Let's try that. David, are you online? Yeah, looks like you're muted.
Awesome.
Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going great, man. How you doing?
Doing great. It's gonna be a fun day today. So
oh yeah,
we're
absolutely.
probably sharing about 200 tips today.
I don't know if I'm gonna have 200 tips. And I
Yeah.
can't keep up with my buddy Rob, man. I tell you, he's so daggum organized, and just he keeps up with everything really well. But really, really happy to be here today.
Yeah.
Calling in from the beautiful town of Supply, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
So let me go
Awesome.
ahead and get my screen shared here so we can
Okay.
start seeing what's going on. Share this, and again, can everybody see my screen okay there?
Yes.
Awesome. So really, like I said, really happy to be here today. Glad that everybody had a chance to come in and join us for this. Do a couple more things here real quick so I can see what's going on. I'm going to be talking to you today about Revit and Autodesk Construction Cloud, and a couple things that are near and dear to my heart, things that I use on a regular basis. Again, and Fleming uses just constantly. And so just a little bit about me. I'm from Supply, North Carolina, like I told you guys. And if you're from Texas, I hope you notice in the hat up there a little bit of Fredericksburg, Texas. So a shout out to one of my favorite places there. I'm an engineering technology manager for Gannett Fleming. I'm part of the Autodesk Expert Elite program, have been for about 9 years. I'm a certified professional for the electrical and mechanical products and an Autodesk certified instructor. I've been a speaker mentor and actually helped start that program for Autodesk University, and I've been a top speaker for them 4 times and been in the top 50 for several years. But just really enjoy going to that event. But one of the other things a lot of people don't know about me is I'm actually part of a program called Directly, and where Autodesk actually reached out to several expert elites a few years ago to start a program where we took a look at support questions that were coming in for Autodesk products. And so I'm one of the founding members of that program. So you might see a little pop up when you post a support question that says, hey, this might be a good thing for a directly expert to help you out with. And so myself, Rob, several other people, you're going to hear from Nauman later, we've all participated in this program. And it's a great way for us to understand the kinds of problems and issues that people are having. And so the topics I'm going to talk about today are actually coming from some of the most frequent support questions that I get in that portal and in that site, and things that I'm reviewing for other users. And in some cases, I'll step up and help them out and figure out, hey, this is what you actually need to be doing. And so we're going to talk about a couple of different things today. We're going to talk about Revit and ACC best practices, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Revit itself, families, what I do with my template, and some really important things about where can I actually work on Revit files, because I'm seeing a more and more frequent set of problems showing up because people really don't understand what you can and can't do with different working environments. So I want to make sure we cover all that today. So we're going to start off talking about Revit and Autodesk Construction Cloud. And if you're on the chat, if you can just pop up and let Tony know how many people are actually using Autodesk Construction Cloud. And so Tony, when you see a number, if you can just chime in and let me know how many people are actually using it. Then this is something that we actually have over 1,100 projects at Gannett Fleming hosted in ACC. And so that's a lot. I mean, there's a ton of people that actually are using this as their primary platform. And we started using it after a malware attack. We had been using it, but we started using it in earnest after a malware attack in 2020. And so we've gone to all cloud-based platforms. We still have a software distributed WAN, but we're trying to get away from local file servers just because of some of the security risks that are involved, but also because of the benefits in working in ACC. So it's a big plus for us in this particular case. So just a little quick note, if you don't know what ACC is and what we're working on now, is what's also known as a unified platform, or Autodesk Docs. This is something that my company implemented back in July of 2023 that we decided to move up to this version because of the features that it offers. And the key components of it are Autodesk Docs, which is where you manage your files and have access management, where you can bridge between multiple different vendors and different clients and JV partners. Just set up a couple of these yesterday. Really great tool to allow me to connect projects across different cloud platforms. There's new features like data exchanges coming out where you're going to be able to dump out parts of a model so you can actually get more focused on specific aspects of the model. There's a design collaboration tool that you can use now that's been available for a while that you can use for change management for managed delivery type projects. And one I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail is model coordination and how Revit actually helps that out. There's also an insights feature that's a homepage that you can go to for project managers. Probably not going to get in detail for that one today, but just wanted to kind of give you an example of some of the things that we're using. And you can see this is a project in the image that we actually did. That's a central inventory project for New Jersey Turnpike. And so just an example of one of our cloud projects that we have and how easy it is to get around and use that tool to visualize it to see what's going on. So typically you can get into the Autodesk Construction Cloud from acc.autodesk.com and doc some files and projects. That's your typical login. And again, this is what an example of a unified platform looks like. It's a nice, clean interface, easy to find things. But I want to point something out. Think of this as your server in the cloud. So if you're traditionally used to working on a local file server, that's all this is. This is simply a server sitting in an Amazon Web Service that everybody in your company has managed access to, but you can also share with your clients, with vendors, whatever you need to, with very tightly controlled access. And it's something that we use, and we keep our sites really nice and tight. We use a lot of good project templates for this. We have standards that we include with these projects, and we've got a good structure that addresses all our different business groups, all our different business lines in a very uniform format. But it's really important to take time to learn how to set this stuff up and be efficient with it. So one of the advantages of working with Revit in the cloud is something we started an initiative project with this past year, was to really get into model coordination. And so with Revit, one of the things that people have done for years, and one of the reasons why people use Revit, is the ability to do a 3D model of what they're seeing in their building, right? And I'm an MEP guy. I get duct and pipe and conduit and cable tray, and I constantly have projects where we find stuff that's running into each other. And one of the advantages of the 3D tools in here is that ability from Revit all the way up through the platforms to be able to do interference detection. And so we sort of did it, but probably not as much, because somebody actually had to stop and run a command to say, compare my ducts in this model to my structure in another model. Somebody had to manually do that task. Then we started using Navisworks. If you're not familiar with that, but it's Navisworks Managed. It's been around for decades. It's a kind of an agnostic file format where you can bring in everything. You can bring in Autodesk, Bentley, AutoCAD. It doesn't matter. You can bring all these files together and mash them all up into one model and actually see conflicts, do soft and hard clashes. So you're not just physically touching each other, but a clearance around an object. You can use Navisworks for that. And then a few years ago, Autodesk actually put model coordination back in BIM 360 and then really improved it for the unified platform so that it works a heck of a lot more efficiently than it has in the past. And so with this tool, what we do is we set up a coordination space, right? And so in that coordination space, we're saying, I want to look for specific types of clashes between different models. So these are based on our project discipline models. And a really cool feature about this is that you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is set up the space, get your models linked in, and then determine what types of classes you want. And you can see, I've actually went through with one of my best architectural designers, a guy who used to be on my team and is now one of the senior project architects for the company. And I said, let's take your project and do an example of it here and make an example of it. And so we actually said, all right, we want to compare the architectural model to the structural model to all the different files that are in here and different views within those files, and actually say, where are there different clashes? Where are there different issues? And what was really cool about this is this actually does this in real time. This is constantly monitoring the Revit models that you have in the cloud, and it's looking for those clashes. And so it can generate that report to say, I have this many clashes that I can focus down on and say, is this really a clash, or is this just something that's not technically clash, like a door in a wall? You know, that's not a clash in that case, but it could look at that level of detail. And so one of the advantages to doing this is the visualization of those clashes. You can see within that central inventory building, not really good to see that image up there, but if you look above the garage door, there's a light right in the track of the garage door, you know? And the fact that we have this here in our model, and yet somebody didn't take the time to look at it, but it's visualized right here. So as I pick on that clash and I look at it, the program will actually zoom to that view and show you where the clashes are. And they also help you visualize it. And so if you take a look at the lower image, this is actually a shaded view showing a pipe going through a duct. And so all that highlighted duct is something that was reported as a clash with the coordination tool. And so now you can also have meetings and use the issues tools to actually track what's going on with these conflicts and resolve them within one environment. So I got another question to go out to the group in the chat up here. How many of you guys use something like Blue Beam Review to do your level 1, level 2 QA QC reviews, to actually look at PDFs of what the printout is, to do coordination? How many of you guys actually do that? You know, just raise your hand up real quick and Tony will pop up and tell us how many people are actually doing it. But if you think about that, it's a step out. It's another silo where you have to export data to another program to actually do conflict detection or to do reviews of a model. Here, I'm seeing it in real time. So instead of me doing a markup over a PDF to say, fix this, I actually create the issue here in the ACC environment, and it's tracked back into the model when you have the issues tool loaded up. So it's a really cool little feature in here. And again, we use the meetings tool to set up discussions about where these conflicts are and how to resolve them. And when we started using this, we actually saw a dramatic reduction in how many change orders we got on a project. And I can tell you that's one thing you don't want to do. I actually walked into New York City DEP a few years ago, and they knew I was coming. I knew the BIM manager over there, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to come in and meet some people in the office." And he very conveniently arranged to have a bunch of people with T-shirts on that said change order and a little no signal around them, right? He said, "We don't want to have any change orders." I'm like, "Hey, that the client's telling me that. I need to be doing a better job of making sure I'm checking my models up front." So if you are using Revit, I strongly, especially if you're using ACC, I strongly recommend you use model coordination. It's included in your core BIM Collaborate Pro subscription, and it's included in your Autodesk Doc subscription. It's not something like Build where you have to pay a higher fee to get extra features. Design collaboration, model review, model coordination, insights, and docs are all part of that one package. So you're already paying for it. So put it to use. So that's one feature that I really like in ACC that I like to show people and talk to them about. I want to talk a little bit more about what we're doing with ACC, how we're working in the cloud in here, and how we can make it more efficient for us. And so we actually started changing how we do things and how we manage users getting into a project. And so we started saying, okay, we don't want everybody to have project admin credentials, because when you give somebody those credentials, it means that anybody can be added to a project. A person with project admin credentials can actually add any individual. They can invite somebody to a project, and they have full control over permissions in a project. Now think about this for a second. Why is that a bad idea? From a security risk standpoint, you don't want to have just anybody signing up and accessing your site. You want to be able to control your access into that site. So we actually went through an exercise this year and took away everybody's project admin credentials and gave them what we called a new BIM manager role. And within that BIM manager role, they have permissions to edit any file in the project. They have edit level permissions, but they don't have manage level permissions. In other words, they can't change permissions. They can't change roles. So they can basically create files, rename folders, do all that good stuff. Something that you want them to do on a typical server, but not necessarily that would give them access to what you're doing in the cloud. To go along with this, we actually changed how we're using ACC after my partner, Nauman Marshall-Waller, who's going to be presenting later this afternoon. Nauman is the one who actually encouraged me to switch over to role-based permissions management. And so in this particular case, we went back through and said, okay, within my company where we have 2,700 employees, we have 5 primary business groups, we have probably 30 different business lines. We set up permissions based on that person's business group and business line, so they could be pre-assigned to a folder and a template and have all that other good stuff going on for them. And so if you have somebody from the outside that's coming in, you can do the same thing. You can set up a role for them and say, okay, instead of it being a Gannett Fleming BIM manager, it could be a Wade Trim BIM manager, right? It could be somebody that has that specific role, but they don't have project admin access. And so if you work with somebody on a regular basis, you might want to set that role up for them using your account admin credentials to define that role for somebody who's going to be accessing your site. Otherwise, you can just use the defaults like architect, contractor. Those are fine. You can have those roles created. But keep in mind that roles in companies can only be created by an account admin in ACC. So Joe Blow user can't do this. You have to set this stuff up. Why is this so important from a Revit standpoint? One of the beauties of Revit, if you haven't done this already, is work sharing. This is one of the features why I love it. It's the ability for multiple users to edit a file at one time. And so when we create this structure, by having that role assigned, then I automatically can give that person permission to edit whatever they need to within their structure. And so Revit does need that kind of permission set up. Say, should I allow somebody to edit this file, or should they just be using view and download? If you're linking, excuse me, I choked up for a second. What happens when you talk too fast? and you haven't had enough coffee in. So in this particular case, we have our folder structure set up to where somebody has view and download permissions when they're actually linking a Revit model in, but they only have edit permissions when they're actually opening the file up and create it. So that's how our folder structure is set up. And so the beauty of that is be able to do that through the project template. This is another feature that was specific to Autodesk Construction Cloud and the unified platform, is to have a project template now that can have predefined roles, predefined client types, predefined project types. And a CAD admin can have as many project templates as they want. And the cool part about this is that you can pre-assign those roles. So now, instead of you spending all this time setting up the project, you have this predefined within your template. So as you create it, you're already off to the races, and you don't have to actually manipulate a lot of stuff once the project gets created. So it'll save you some time to actually do that. So, and additionally, this is how we looked at it. We said, okay, our templates are going to include pre-assigned members and administrators. We started adding that BIM manager role so that somebody from a business line, a specific individual, would have that level of control to manage how a project is structured and how it's organized. You can also pre-assign what entitlements out of ACC, like, am I going to use model coordination? Am I going to use design collaboration? When you assign that user to the template, you can also pre-assign what access they're going to have. So you add that to the template members, and that helps expedite the setup as well. The other entitlements, you have to do these separately, like once the project is created. So after the project gets created, I can say, okay, I need to add model coordination and design collaboration to a user after they're there. But the fact that they're already in your project template, it just saves you a step. So it's all about saving time. It's all about saving steps so that I can focus more on my design itself than I am on managing the files that I'm actually working. ACC is a pretty powerful tool in that. But there's a couple of things, and this is where we start to get into the support world of saying, okay, where do we actually run into problems? Where are we having most of our issues? I cannot say this enough. And I actually wrote a blog post on my blog that I have online, the MEP CAD BIM engineer. It's mep-cad.blogspot.com. But I wrote a post about this to tell people this is where you can and can't work and how you're supposed to work in ACC. And rule number one is any links that you have, whether they're DWGs, PDFs, images, point clouds, IFC files, anything, they have to live in ACC. You have to have those files in that climate. What you don't want to do is have one person on your team that says, well, I don't have BIM Collaborate Pro and I don't have Autodesk Docs, so I'm going to use Dropbox and send you my files, and then you can put them up there for me. You're legally allowed to shoot somebody like that. No, you're not really. I'm kidding. That's a joke. But seriously, you need to have that person be a part of your cloud, right? They need to be engaged in different ways, but they need to have access to that cloud. We're going to talk about Bridge in a minute here. You have to have the desktop connector reference tool to actually see this stuff and to actually have that link. So there's two things in here that we want to talk about. If you have a CAD file that's linked to somebody's local hard drive and somebody opens up a Revit model, you're going to see a warning. And some of you might have already seen this. It says the requested service is not available. If you're a Revit user and you're working in the cloud, I guarantee you've probably seen it more than once. That's typically referring to the fact that a file cannot be found. It's somewhere linked in a linked file. It's a nested link somewhere else, and it's in a location that somebody in the cloud doesn't have access to. So it's like the old days of putting things on your local hard drive and then linking or XREFing an AutoCAD drawing into another one from a local hard drive to a server. Not everybody in the company has access to your local hard drive. So you don't want to create those kinds of links. And back in those days, you'd want to have all those files in the same location, or at least on the same server. It's the same rule in here. It still applies. So make sure that any images, any PDFs, any DWGs that you're using are in your ACC environment. Don't link them anywhere else. That's rule number one. Make sure you get that squared away. Now, to help you with this, if you're working in the cloud, another great myth, desktop connector is required for you to work in ACC docs. Don't think that it's not. You might not be using Revit, you might be using AutoCAD, you might be using something else, but you absolutely want to have desktop connector installed and running, because that tool is actually the local cache version, and it exposes the local cache version of all the files that you have in the cloud. With the 16 .x versions of Desktop Connector, Autodesk changed the APIs that they're using, make it behave more like OneDrive. So now when you see files in the cloud and you see the Autodesk Docs shortcut show up on your desktop, you're actually seeing the cached copy of what's in the cloud. And you can now use more tools like copy and paste. You can use rename. Don't always want to do that, but you have more things that you can work with in the Autodesk Docs environment. There's a few caveats with this one as well too, especially with AutoCAD and especially with links from AutoCAD going into Revit. They have a tool in there called the Reference Explorer. I strongly recommend you look this one up and figure out how this one works. But the Reference Explorer actually allows you to pick a file and say, show me all the links. It doesn't matter whether it's a Revit file or a DWG, but it shows you how files are linked into that one file. And this is how you track down when somebody's got a link that's outside of the environment, it's back to their local hard drive, but also if it's a bad link. And AutoCAD users, I'm going to pick on Rob and Tony real quick. You guys know what a circular XREF is, right? You seen those?
Yes.
Tony's laughing. He's like, yeah, I get those all the time. We also get people that don't understand the difference between an absolute path and a relative path, right? Absolute is the full path. Relative is the shortened path. And everything in ACC, when you create it there, it's always relative path. There is no absolute pathing except in a CAD file when somebody's going outside of the environment. You'll notice the path says cloud now, and that's actually a relative path. And so you want to use this to visualize where those locations are and make sure that you don't have things that are in the wrong place. It also can tell you whether something is attached or overlaid. And I'm sure everybody knows the difference between those two, right? Attached means that I can have one file attached inside of another, attached inside of another, attached inside of another. And as I link that file in, I'm going to see all those files that are attached. But overlay is only one level deep. So if you link a file in and you have it set to overlay, you're only going to see the contents of that file. You're not going to see all the other contents for every other link and reference that's in those files. This same rule applies to both Revit and AutoCAD. So you want to make sure you understand how this structure works. And I'm a big overlay guy. I don't use attachment as much as I used to, especially since I started not using AutoCAD architecture as much, where attach was really great for setting up constructs and elements and views. That process worked really well, but in Revit, it doesn't work as well. You're better off using overlay most of the time. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing when you're working in ACC and you're using these tools is that you're using the same version of Revit across the board. So if I'm working with a consultant, a third-party app, another engineering firm, another architecture firm, you all have to be on the same build of Revit, whether it's 2023.1.3 or 2024.2. You need to be on the same version because you're not just updating Revit, you're also updating the cloud work sharing tools that go with that. And so you want to make sure that you have both those versions, because if you work in an older release, your cloud work sharing tools may not be the same version, and you may have an issue with an older build that was fixed in a newer build. So keep everybody on the same build. And the same rule applies to Desktop Connector. For those of you who still have Desktop Connector 14, get out. Don't come to my conferences anymore. You should be on Desktop Connector 16 and newer. And I'll tell you right now, we're using 16.5. We're testing 16.6.1 right now and getting ready to roll that out sometime in the near future because it does a better job of managing sheet sets. So those are some of the things that we want to make sure that everybody's on the same release. You have to be on the same build. You cannot have one user on 16.3, one user on 16.5, one user on 16.6. You do not want to do that. So make sure that you have, when you set your projects up and you communicate as a team, this is a critical item for users. And again, most of the problems I see on directly that pop up, this is a frequent case of where somebody has an old build and they just having problems syncing and things are not working correctly. A couple other rules about living in ACC before we jump off of this and start looking at Revit itself is you want to make sure that you keep your files and path names short and stay away from special characters. Actually, it was really funny. I saw somebody from Autodesk that I'm not going to mention that actually had a % sign in the file name and in the path of a file that we were working on that we were testing for development. And I'm saying, you realize that that's going to wind up corrupting that file because the OneDrive APIs in the Windows environment, they have restrictions on what you can use in terms of special characters. Here's a great idea. Don't use them. How many of you know that a space in a file name or path actually takes up 3 characters? So why put a space in a file name, especially if you're limited to 260 characters? Now, there is the ability to extend beyond that path. There's a couple of variables you can do for Windows, but it doesn't really work that well with ACC. So it's just a rule of thumb, avoid them altogether. Don't use exclamation points, don't use commas, don't use periods in the file name, and especially don't use things like parentheses, plus minus signs. Again, I've had several cases where somebody had some characters I've never even seen before in a file name, and the file got corrupted and they couldn't figure out why I couldn't maintain it. Keep those clean. And the last thing we're going to talk about is, where do these files go? We constantly see errors where people are having files that are out of date. They're not cached. They're not working correctly. You probably have seen some people talk about you need to clean up what's called your collaboration cache folder on your C drive, or your temp folders on your C drive. So if I have a problem where I'm getting an error that says, oh, I'm having this model is corrupt and needs to be reviewed, or needs to be tested again, or it cannot be opened in that case. Most of the time it's because you got out of date collaboration cache files. That can happen one of a couple of different ways. If you live where I live and you're on HamsterNet, where you're running basically a 1 megabit connection down and 52 characters a second going up, you're going to have communication problems. You need to be running at a minimum a 300 meg download speed and a 30 meg upload speed. Most places, like right now, even though I live in the sticks, we're getting ready to get fiber service out here. I already have a 1 gig download and a 60 meg upload, but that's getting ready to go up to 1 gigabyte here in the next year. You cannot pay enough for that kind of a service. Spend the money on your internet access and make sure that it's fast, because most failures occur when a Revit model cannot communicate quickly enough with the cloud. And here's a trick question for people out here that you can put in the chat. Is Revit, the RVT file, the only thing that talks to a model in the cloud? Is the RVT file, when you save an RVT file, is that the only thing that's being saved up to the cloud and the only thing that's communicating to the cloud? And the answer is no. There's also all these temporary files that are constantly maintaining contact in milliseconds with the central file in the cloud. Those are the data files that say who borrowed what element, what work sets are enabled, what permissions are allowed. These data files constantly contact with the central file, and they communicate back and forth. And so you need to make sure that you have a fast enough internet connection for that to be maintained, but also understand that when you save something or you sync something or you publish something, well, make sure you give yourself enough time for this thing to sync and save. I typically tell people, I said, don't expect to see a change in most cases for at least 3 to 5 minutes. Plus, in the modern day world, we expect that to happen instantly. But the reality of it is, you need to make sure that you have a decent internet connection in order for that to work. The local copy of what you have in the cloud is going to be under your users folder. This was another issue that we saw coming up with people. Desktop Connector 16, you used to have a folder right underneath your username called ACC Docs. And with the 16 versions, they actually changed this now to have one called DC for Desktop Connector and then ACC Docs, because Desktop Connector can now also link Fusion and Drive under one tool. So when you're using these tools, just know that the local copy of your files, the actual copy of your files, is going to be in this folder. And so the nice thing about the new versions of Desktop Connector is they actually limited how many projects that you can have associated with that site. And so it was 40 with 16.5 and 16.6. I think they go to 60 projects. But this keeps you from having too much information cached to your local hard drive, and also can avoid having you be in a situation where you're running out of disk space, which we saw on a frequent basis. So just know that these are where the files live. And when you have a project that's not active, as long as you have Desktop Connector closed and exited, you can go and delete files out of this folder. That's the key. Have Revit closed, have AutoCAD closed, have Desktop Connector exited, sign out, exit, get out of it. And then you can delete files out of here. And this also solves a lot of caching problems, a lot of coordination problems with your files. So that's a real quick nutshell about what we're doing with ACC and Revit. Do we have any questions, any comments that anybody wants to ask right now about working in that environment?
So far, no questions. Yeah,
Okay. All right.
great stuff, though.
So excuse me, like I said, too much coffee this morning. Not enough bourbon, Rob. I'm sorry. Rob, I'll have to tell you about that later. But All right, so let's switch over and let's talk about some of my stuff that I like about Revit families, templates, and where to work on your Revit files when you're not working in the cloud. So there's a ton of cool stuff that's available in Revit that you can do. And so I wanted to look at a couple things. I wanted to talk about a nested family example. We're going to look at a receptacle today. And the reason why I bring this one up is that I actually had a support case come in the other day where somebody was trying to do electrical and they really didn't know what to do. So I gave them all my AU content and said, hey, here's what I do in AU. I got a template that I've created for users. I've got a lot of non-hosted families in here that work exceptionally well for panels, receptacles, lights, and stuff like that. It makes it easier for the new user to work because it works similar to what they were doing in AutoCAD. And so I provided that back to him, and he got really confused when we started talking about receptacles because he wanted to create a 240 volt receptacle. And I didn't have one in my library because I don't use one like that typically. We went through the whole exercise of how to create his own type and modify those properties, but then he really got confused on my family. And how did I have all these different receptacles in one family type and make them work easily so that I don't have to have 50 different receptacle families that somebody uses. It's always better to have one family with multiple types than it is to have the same number of families based on those types. Keeps your model compact, keeps it simple, allows you to swap things out. We're going to start off by looking at that first and looking at Boolean operations, and then we're going to come back and look at a Revit template, my template, and the AU template I provided this year, so you guys can see why this is an advantage to do things this way. So I'm going to jump over here to Revit real quick, and this is the receptacle. It's just a box, man. There's nothing sophisticated about this guy at all, right? It's just a box that goes on the wall, sits on the wall. This is the faceplate. This is the box itself. And so when we talk to people about Boolean operations and about how something is controlled, a Boolean operation is nothing more than a yes/no statement. Either yes or no. How does this work? And so in this case, I use that for visibility. And so if I wanted this box to be visible or not in the plan view, I actually can set up a switch here and go in and say, 3D model and say, okay, how do I want that to appear in view? So if I want each model to be unique, like I want to turn off the box and only show the faceplate, probably not something that you're going to do, but in a 3D view, if you want to limit that, and if later on, if you're doing a data exchange and you want to pull just faceplates out for a data library to say, I need to know how many faceplates I'm having in a project, think down the road about how you would do that. This is simply saying when I pick visibility, I'm automatically getting a Boolean operation that says this is either going to be visible, yes or no. And I can tell it how I want that to be visible by telling it what category I need it to be a part of. So visibility in this case is graphics. I want it to be something that I'm controlling from a visibility standpoint. And this is a family parameter. I don't use a shared parameter for this. I only use shared parameters for stuff that goes in schedule. I don't use it in formulas. I use family parameters. I use my shared parameters when I have data that needs to be shared. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And so now if I actually go into a plan view, I can actually look under type properties and I can say, okay, here's 3D model. If I don't want that to be visible, I can turn it off, right? On and off. And I actually can do another neat little trick in here. I'll show you another neat little trick you can do with Boolean. I'm going to do new parameter. I'm going to call 2D symbol and make that instance based. And I'm just going to create the parameter as a basic yes/no parameter. Put under graphics. Click OK. And now what I can do is add a formula here and say not 2D symbol. Hope I did this right. I actually think I have to put that in brackets and parentheses in here. So let me just make sure I did that right. Equal not 2D symbol. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I screwed this up. I figured I would at some point today. But that's one way that you can do this. You can have one that says that it's not equal to that one, and one turns the other one off, right? So that's just one way that you can control adding a parameter. You can add it manually, or you can add it by picking an object and checking the visibility parameter. Well, let's take a look at these. I want to undo that step real quick. And I want to talk about, in this particular case, why I would want to control different family types underneath here. So I'm going to go back to the ref level view. I want to look back under type properties. I want you to notice how many different types that I have inside of this particular file. So in this case, my wall mounted receptacle has duplex receptacles, countertop, emergency, GFI, hospital, isolated ground, split wire, surge protected, TV receptacles, weatherproof, weather resistant, Then I got quad receptacles, quad countertop, single pole, special. I've got all these different types. And the only real difference between a lot of these is the elevation that I set for the box and then the symbol that shows up in the plan. And so this gives me the ability to turn the symbols on and off based on what I want to see in a plan view. And so if your model is set up correctly and you go back and you look at the 3D model type and you look at the visibility settings for this, you see right now that I'm only going to see the 3D model when I'm in a plan view. But when I'm only going to see the 3D model when I'm in an elevation view or a 3D view in this case. And so I can see that at all levels of detail, but I don't ever show it in plans because in the plan view, I want to show the symbol. One of the old school things about doing electrical. And so in this particular case, the model's turned off, but the symbol is turned on. So now to control which symbol I see associated with the view, I simply have a nested symbol, and this is a nested family. So if I actually open up this family and take a look at it, here's just the line work that I have in here, and I've got this set to an actual category. This is another important thing you want to do. This is going to show up under generic annotations, but underneath generic annotations, I've created a subcategory that I've associated the lines with and called it electrical power symbols. And so that way, if I want to turn all the symbols off in a model, I can actually just turn that annotation category off for that view, and that will turn them off globally. It's another way to control how I see it. But when it comes to the type, I actually don't want to do this. I actually want to make sure that the family itself is actually told to be on and off based on where it is. So if you take a look at the formula that I've got here, I said, okay, I've created this yes, no parameter called special. And so if I go back and look at special, it's just simply saying that if this box is checked within that family, then that's what I'm going to see. Okay. So let's take a look at the examples in here. I'm going to go ahead and flip back over here to the type properties so you can see this. So right now my wall mounted special shows that symbol. But if I go to duplex, I'm actually showing just a duplex symbol. If I go to duplex countertop, I can actually change this, and notice that the symbol didn't change, but the elevation of where this thing is going to be placed has changed. So I'm actually moving the box up and down, but I have the same symbol. Now, if I go to a GFI, I can actually have a couple of different things going on. Like I can have duplex in here, but the type mark is different now. When I load it into my template, I'm going to have the type mark predefined for GFI. These are all duplex symbols, and they're all pretty much the same. But what about when I go to quadruplex? Start to look at that symbol. Well, that's a whole different symbol. I actually took a duplex symbol, and then I created another family that has two lines that go sideways to represent a quadruplex symbol. I'm actually using an existing symbol and another set of lines or another symbol to go over top of it. So I can use these symbols in combination. It doesn't have to be just one symbol. I can do a combination of different symbols. So it's a really cool way of doing this. So like the emergency receptacle that I have, a duplex emergency, this one is actually showing the lines, but the patterns that fill in that receptacle are ones that actually have their own visibility. And so I can turn those on and use them like in a quadruplex receptacle. I go to quadruplex receptacle, I've got all these different options that I can actually assign. So this is one of the really cool things about working with families that have nested families inside of them, and how you can use visibility controls to turn these things on and off. And so as long as you've got the family loaded in, and this is the other quick tip about this, is you want to make sure that when you put these families in, they all have the same insertion point. So like mine, I've always got the bottom of that symbol right here along that reference plane in the annotation family that I use. You have to consistently create your symbols that you're going to use. Once you have them consistently created, you want to make sure things like the size are the same, the size of the circle, size of the lines. I'm going to tell you my cheat method. I took the duplex receptacle annotation family first, and then I saved it as all my different versions. So the circle was always the same size and the distance off the line was always the same. And once I did that, then I just did save as, save as, save as, and then all loaded them back into my family. So that's just a work process for how you would make something like this. And it's really cool how that works, is that you can have all these nested families in here. Does this just apply to receptacles? Absolutely not. Think about it if you had a table family and you had a whole bunch of different chairs combinations, right? You could actually have a table family set up and then have like 6 chairs, 8 chairs, 4 chairs. And you can use those visibility controls to turn the visibility of these items on and off based on what you want to see inside of that view. And remember, when you do one family, when you load one family, and it's just like using a block in AutoCAD. If if you got a block that has 50 lines in it and you put that block in 10 times, how many elements do you have in an AutoCAD drawing? You have 60, because it's the original block of 50 lines and then 9 more copies, or 59 copies. You have 9 more copies of what that original family is. So you're not adding, if you're doing 10 times, you're not adding 500 lines. You're adding the block representation that has the lines and then a reference back to that block. It's the same thing with a family. You put it in here, you use it once. You're not going to replicate it 50 times. If you put 6 or 8 chairs around the table, it's going to be the one family that's just simply copied 9 times. So you don't have to worry about file capacity and that stuff. It keeps it really tight, really small, really simple, and really easy to work with. So that's the nested family thing that I wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any questions on that? How to work with that?
No questions so far.
Okay, one thing I do want to point out is if you go back to my AU class from this year, all the content I'm showing you today is available from my AU class from last year. So if you go download the data sets with it, everything I'm showing you today is coming from that data sets, with possibly with the exception of not my Gantt and Fleming template. I'm going to show you the AU template, but you definitely can have, you got a lot of stuff that you can use that's available for free. Thank you very much. You're welcome. All right, so let's jump back over to PowerPoint here. The next thing we're going to talk about are templates. We don't spend enough time on templates. As a user, one of the first things you need to do is be taking a look at your template. So if we compare what we did with AutoCAD and what we did with Revit, what was AutoCAD all about? It was about layers. It was about text styles, dimension styles, fonts. It was about annotation categories, right? In some cases, I've seen this, and I want to tell you, if you're doing this for the love of God, please stop. I see people that would actually have in their template, they'd have a paper space layout with a sheet, and then sitting off to the side, they have like 1,000 blocks of all the things that they use in their drawing. Stop doing that, please. You don't need to do that. Use your palettes, use your libraries for that stuff, but don't put them in and have them actually physically placed in a drawing. That's the key, is don't physically place them in the drawing. You can have all the blocks you want in your template, but don't go back and actually have a physical representation that somebody's picking over the side and going copy and putting them in a plan view or putting them somewhere else in the view. Don't do that. Have the blocks in there. Don't have them placed, because you're changing the extents of the drawing and you're actually putting data that's not relevant to the design. The only thing that should ever go in a Revit model, and the only thing that should ever go in an AutoCAD drawing, is what you're actually creating. That representation of that object. Those lines that represent a wall. That's the only thing that should ever be physically created. That's just a rule of thumb after almost 4 decades of doing this. You definitely want to make sure you're doing that. So what can I do in a Revit template that I can't do in AutoCAD? Where do I get some advantages of being in Revit as opposed to AutoCAD? Let's go ahead and take a look at my template here. And so within a Revit template, a little bit different beast in this case. So I can start off by having predefined floor levels. And the really thing that's nice about this is that if I have a level that's already in here and I start to build things, then whatever I create that's associated with that level will stay with that level. This is another trick question for people in the crowd. Is everything hosted in Revit? Is everything you create hosted? The short answer is yes, because even a non-hosted element has a host, and that's the level that it's created on. So if you draw a wall up 50 feet and it's associated with the first floor level, it could be crossing second, third, and fourth floors, but its host is going to be the level that it was created on. The same thing with lights. With non-hosted lights, with receptacles, anything like that, you want to be in a view that has that level created, that so when you put in that receptacle, even if it's non-hosted and you adjust the height on it, it's still going to be hosted to that level. So as the level moves up and down, the object is going to move up and down. And that's also going to include things like connected pipe and connected duct. Those things will move with it. So you want to have at least a couple of levels defined in here. If you're doing MEP, you're going to use the levels in the architectural model, and you're going to copy monitor them in here, create all your plan views, so your views all align. So in this particular case, you can see we actually did a few more things with levels that you don't normally see. We actually have a whole bunch of different types in here. And so we have levels for existing conditions. We have levels for primary datums based on different units, decimal feet, target meters. Earlier you heard Rob talking about survey feet and how that's deprecated. You have the same type of units that you can create in here, and those same units apply in Revit that they do in AutoCAD. So just be aware of that. And so we also have other levels that don't necessarily define a floor plan. In my case, primary datum is used to define a floor plan. But then I could have other levels that are like working levels. And so I could have a secondary working level that actually shows up differently than one that's in a plan view. So if I make this like a secondary working level, notice that the color is different and it uses a different line type. So you can set something up like in this template for a visualization tool to help you understand where you're working and how you're working. And am I working in something that's related to a plan view, or am I working in something that's like a temporary level that might have to get moved up and down a bunch? I used to see people do levels in a wall for like half walls. And that's fine. You can do that. You just have to make sure that you show the level as something that's not defining a floor plan. Just make sure you differentiate between those. The other thing we spend a lot of time on in our view templates, besides just something like levels, are the views themselves. And so you want to make sure that you're spending the time to create view templates based on the types of views that you have and how you're going to use them in a plan view. So Autodesk, in their infinite wisdom, they only give you a handful of these things. You're actually looking at my corporate template right now. Let's jump back over to the AU template so you can see this. Normally, what you would get from an Autodesk template right out of the box, I've got some of those, not all of them, but it's something like this: architectural plan, architectural elevation, architectural section. Okay, that's great. But when we look at the different templates and how we're doing things, I name mine a little bit different so I can actually filter by name and say, find me everything that's related to a plan, find me everything that's related to a section. So I put that view type at the front instead of the back to make the filtering work a little better. Then I actually have all the different types of electrical views. So within plan electrical, this might be one that says, okay, in this case, if I'm just looking at the electrical discipline, these are the things that are turned on by default. Okay, so I can see plan electrical, I'm going to have all this stuff turned on. Food service equipment, fire protection devices, lighting devices, light fixtures, mechanical controls, and I can override this kind of stuff. If I don't want it to be detailed, I can say, hey, I want to see mechanical equipment because I got a power connection, but I want it to be coarse. Only show me the minimal amount of detail. So you can control that in your view template. But what if I want to filter this? I want to have one for lights and then one for power. I can actually have a separate template that I apply to lighting plans. And in that case, notice that I'll have something like electrical fixtures turned off. I still have panels under electrical equipment, but somebody's not going to see my receptacle. So the beauty of this is that you can have all these view templates in here. And here's the real meat and bones of this, the part that a lot of people miss. And a lot of people don't understand when they're setting up their views. And we get support cases about it, is that when you're creating a floor plan, you can actually pick a predefined view type, and you need to make these in your template. Go ahead and make the common types of views that you have. And when you edit that view template can already be assigned. So what am I doing here? In this view template, I'm actually creating a predefined set of values that are not just the visibility objects, but the scale, the photographic exposure, the detail level, the annotation visibility. All this stuff gets set up in a view template. And so by having a bunch of predefined view types like HVAC floor plan, HVAC ceiling plan, electrical floor plan, electrical power, electrical lighting, by having those defined in your template, you're actually telling the user when they create a view, all you have to do is pick this one type. That's it. All you have to do. When you create that, you create your views, and you can actually do as many levels as you want. So if you have multiple levels on a project, you can control pick all of them. If you have 50 levels in here, you could create 50 HVAC plans with one command. One command is how you can do this. And so it makes that editing and justification of it a lot simpler. And then if you need to worry about things like the depth of the view and those kinds of things, you can go back and tell the template that you're working in, hey, don't include view range because I've got different levels that are different elevations and different heights. So you can set a default value, like I want all my views to automatically go to the level above. But I might also want to change it and say, hey, just do the associated level and then take that up to like 13 feet because that's a typical floor elevation. Don't use 7'6" like they did with the AutoCAD, with the out of the box templates. Give it a normal height to what you expect to see. And so you can actually pre-assign these. And if you want the template to control them when you create them, you just simply check the box and say, this is what's going to get applied when I create this view, all these features. So if I want to still be able to edit the scale manually, I don't have to have it controlled by the template. I want to control the detail level, fine, medium, coarse. I don't have to have that controlled by the template. And the user can still edit those things. But I do want to control what they see, the annotation types, filters that we use for views. We predefine all this with a view template. project. So that's one of the important things about working within a particular project like this. I'll go ahead and just create a new floor plan view real quick. Say electrical lighting. Boom, I got my new view in here. And notice that it's already in my right category. I don't get the category with all the question marks on it. Right? If you work in Revit, you see that all the time. It's usually because you created a view and it didn't have a view type or category associated with it. And mine, I do, right? I want to make sure that it shows up under the right category, the right discipline, the right type of view. Because electrical lighting, that's that view type that we just looked at a minute ago. So it helps me sort my project browser better. And so this is just one of the steps that you can do to help making your project setup work a lot faster and be more consistent in how you create things. Now, the other thing that you want to take a look at when you're talking about views in this case is you want to also make sure that you have other things included in your template. Like we have some default schedules that are in here, right? I always have a couple schedules. And let me give you a piece of advice. Not everything that you schedule has to be a schedule you're going to put on a sheet of paper. In other words, I have like a space outdoor air schedule that I use. In that outdoor air schedule, I'm saying, okay, here's the space type that I'm working with. I need to know what the outdoor air method is, the outdoor air per area, the area that I'm working with, the area per person, the number of people. I want to have all these values calculated so that when I actually create the space, then the volume automatically gets generated for me. And so these are basically working schedules that help me understand what's going on with the project. I'm going to jump back over to my template real quick to show you an expanded example of that. As you can see, I've got class views. But if you look at something that we have for analysis, I've got like separate schedules in here that are just basically testing for circuits to make sure they're properly defined in a circuit overload test. So like this circuit check schedule that I have, it gives me all the information about the panel and the circuit. But if you have devices that are circuited and they're not associated with a panel, then I have a rule on here that makes this column red. It makes that cell red to tell you need to go back and make sure you circuit this. So you can have all this stuff in your template, not just for what you're going to produce on the drawings, but how you design. Where are things that you fail in design and where is it that I'm typically doing something that can cause Revit not to behave the way that you expect it to? So that's just a great example of what you can include in here. And then if you want to put your default schedules in here, that's something that you use on a regular basis, and your creative families that already have the shared parameters that are associated with the schedules, life is good. You can do this. But again, you're defining all this in the template. Last thing I want to point out about the template, and I want to share real quick, is I want to go back and talk about content and families. I've seen people put thousands of families in a template. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's just like in AutoCAD. You don't want to have everything in your template. You really don't. Especially if you've upgraded your template from multiple releases. I actually got a template that somebody had created with Revit 2009. And they had carried that same template forward all the way up to 2023. And they couldn't understand why they kept getting corruption. At some point, you have to clean out, start over again, create a new template, and then actually pull the data in so that it's current and you're actually using current features and benefits as opposed to something that might have been available in 2009 but is no longer available, right? And so I look at things that are the most common items that are going to be in a template. And there's one rule of thumb I have. If there's a family that I need to have a type mark assigned, I put that in my template for my most common objects. Now, why do I say that? Because when you're in the family editor, the one value, Autodesk, are you listening to me? This has been a problem forever. The one value you can assign in a family is a type mark. Think about that. And if I look at my receptacles, they're a great example of something that needs a type mark. We talked about the receptacle earlier, right? That duplex receptacle. Well, if I look at this family, right, and I look at the type properties, I go over here and say, okay, let's go ahead and look at the type properties. See, I got GFCI in here, right? I can only assign this label right here, or a type mark right here. I can't go back and put this value in because it doesn't exist in the family editor. So now if I start looking at all these other types that I've created, like the duplex, the isolated ground, the GFI, and I look at those type properties again, see how my custom family that I've created, I have to go here, actually say GFI. And once I have it here created, then the projects that I create from this template already have that type mark assigned. So that's my general guiding rule of thumb for content in a template. If it's something that requires a predefined type mark value, I put it in there. And then I have my templates broken up by discipline. I have architecture, structure, I have MEP all in one template, but I also have separate templates for process, for water, for whatever other types of projects that we work on that have predefined families that require this kind of criteria. So that's why you'll see up here that I've got like HVAC air terminals in here. I've got these predefined in here, and I've got some examples predefined. But anytime somebody can go and duplicate one of these and create a different size, create a different example, it's already here in the project. So these are the ones that we use most commonly. Rule of thumb is keep it simple. Don't put a bunch of stuff in here that you don't need. Like in my case, I've got a few air terminals. Well, look at that many types I have. Remember we talked about the size of the block? Look at this air terminal that's in the family right now and all the different sizes that are in. That's a supply diffuser. And look at the different neck sizes, the different family types, just a ton of different things that I can actually use in here. There's something that I'm going to commonly use on a project. Then if I get down a little bit further here and I start looking underneath something like electrical equipment, I got my power panels in here, right? I got my single phase and I got my 3-phase power panels in here because that's something I use on every project when I'm doing electric. Usually have a drive transformer, right? I have something in there that represents that. It can step voltage up and down. And then when I get to my pipe families, I'm actually using pipe families that are the most common ones that I use. I'll make those pipe types and put those in there so that they're pre-baked, so somebody doesn't have to go and load them up from a library. The whole point in what you're doing with your template is you have to go back and look at what's important and what you need to use in a project and make sure that you got it in there. Let's bounce back to the last thing here because we only got about 4 minutes left. And I want to talk about the one last thing that you need to be aware of about Revit. And this is a big one. The most common question I get is I'm having problem with the Revit model. I can't access the file. It won't let me save changes. I lost all my changes. I hear that question all the time. And so I actually wrote another blog post about this, about understanding where to edit your Autodesk files. And it starts off on something simple. It must be on a Windows SMB supported location. What does SMB stand for? It's code for server message block. And that's basically the criteria that defines how data is communicated between a host and a separate location or between a file and its storage location. And this is what controls read-write parameters. It's what controls file locking. So if you don't know this, Autodesk products and AutoCAD specifically, they haven't controlled file locking since 2007. Same with Revit. It doesn't lock its own files. So when you're working with Revit files, you have to make sure that you're in a Windows 10 or 11 environment or on a Windows server, at least on 2016 or higher for that version. Now, you can use a Revit server. If you're using Revit files, you can actually have a server that has a Revit server instance set up. This comes with the program, and it kind of behaves similar to what ACC does, but it's actually a server behind your firewall. Now, the only limitation of this is you're going to be restricted by the speed of your WAN connections. So just be aware of that. And then there's Autodesk Docs. That's it. This is all that's supported by Autodesk because all of these support those SMB protocols. What is not supported for you to host and edit Revit files? OneDrive, SharePoint. Don't even put your AutoCAD. You can share files up here, but don't edit files from up here. And I saw Tony earlier had a path to a Dropbox location. You can only do that when you're the only person working on that file. Then you can do that because nobody else is going to be able to access that file if you're the only person that has access. But if there's ever a situation that you're telling yourself that more than one person is going to have to do some editing of this file, and that includes linking it into another project, you do not want to use any of these other sites. Even floppy drives, I put that in there as a joke, but you get the idea in here because why? Only one person has access to that particular tool. Only one person has access to that utility. And even if you set file sharing up, the problem with Revit is, remember those constant contact files I was talking about earlier? They have to be talking to that location constantly. And so when you're working in Revit, do yourself a favor. Make sure you're working in one of these environments and don't work on these devices. If you have a problem, like with a NAS SAN appliance or one of these cloud file hosting services, you have to go to that vendor to get help. If you try to post a question with Autodesk, we're going to tell you, are you here? If you're not, you got to go back to that vendor to get help. This is what I wanted to wrap up on. These are things that you don't typically think about when you're working in the Revit environment. and things that you don't typically have to worry about, but there are ways that you can make it faster and make it more efficient for you. So work on your templates, understand how your family's going to get put together, try to take advantage of more advanced techniques and behaviors, and then make sure you know where you're working and that everybody understands where they have to be. So that's it for me. Any questions, any more comments, any feedback, anything anybody else wants to hear?
No questions. Anybody? We do have a 30-minute gap on our next session. So if you really want to stay online, post questions. We do have several of our speakers online that can probably help answer questions. Let me see who's online here. But I'll stay online. David, I don't know if you'll be able to stay online to answer any questions.
I can stay on for a few minutes.
Okay.
I want to throw something back, Tony, while you're talking. I want to
Mhm.
talk about this one too. We were talking about survey units earlier, right?
That was Rob.
So Rob was talking about survey units.
Yeah.
Start using survey feet in your projects.
Yeah.
One of the things that you have to make sure you're doing with Revit is whatever you're doing in AutoCAD, you have to do the same thing in Revit. They can't be separate. So if you have survey feet set up in a Civil 3D file or international feet, you need to do the same thing in Revit.
Mhm.
So when you're linking in a project and doing shared coordinates, I've seen this happen where we had the Revit model set up for survey feet, and then the Civil 3D file was set up for international, and they slightly shifted off of each other, like the example Rob was showing.
Mhm.
So make sure you're consistent about how you do that. And the other thing we tell Civil 3D users too is do not give me the entire county in your Civil 3D file. The only thing that should be in your Civil 3D file is the site that we're working in and the immediate adjacencies. If you've got a block sitting off at 0, and your site's coordinate correct, that invokes an error of a 20-mile radius error, and Revit is only accurate up to 20 miles. And same with AutoCAD, we're only accurate up to like 8 decimal points, right? And so if you have something that exceeds that 20-mile boundary, you can actually get corrupt files. Your views, when you look at something in a view in Revit, if you got a linked CAD file, it looks like the lines aren't touching when actually they are. When you give it zoom on, they're snapped together, but because they can't graphically handle it, they may look off. Text will look jagged. Things will look really weird in the view. So when you get a civil file and you're bringing it into Revit, keep that sucker clean, man. Make sure that you got everything. You don't have items and points shooting off in a Z-plane. Make sure your contours are at the level they're supposed to be. Make sure that your survey points around a slab or something are at the correct elevation. Just make sure those files are as clean as possible. And just pay attention to what you get in from the survey. We actually have a whole exercise of what to do for the Revit user for how to clean up the civil file.
Yep.
One of those little pain in the butt things that I had to deal with all the time.
Yeah, well, sometimes I've run into situations where doing support for clients and they were grabbing stuff from a survey file and then bringing it into civil, but then they didn't realize that, things wasn't lining up properly. Then they later realized that the INS units were different.
Yep.
So the survey
that's
was,
a big one.
different, was different, and then their civil was different. So eventually had to just backtrack, figure out what they were doing, and open up that survey file, and I noticed their IS units was different. So, but yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not just a US problem, it's an international problem because like we have offices in Canada, right? And so we need to make sure that when we have US personnel working on Canadian projects, they understand what the required units are that have to be assigned, right?
Yeah.
And the big part is consistency between those. You want to make sure that you have things set up the same way. And then just clean the file up. I mean, it's like anything else, Revit, AutoCAD, or whatever garbage you put in is what's going to come out of it. So the more well-defined your files are, whether they're civil or architectural, or even manufacturing equipment, you want to draw accurately. There's no such thing as drawing at scale. You never do that, right? Your annotation gets scale, but not the representation of a physical object. That should always be actual size, actual location.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of our Revit projects now too, we actually put this edict out a couple of years ago. All of our Revit projects are now site oriented, site and elevation oriented. We try to avoid having a project where a building's sitting at 0, or at the base coordinate point.
Yeah.
We always do required coordinates from the civil file, so we're really dependent on the civil file to make sure it's correctly defined. And so as we started building out our new computers now, all the Revit users get Civil 3D. they actually are using Civil 3D. We don't want them using plain AutoCAD because if you need to check the units and not only that, but the coordinate system like North Carolina and AD 83, you want to make sure that you can actually access that, check it, and edit it to make sure that it's correct. So that when we link it in and we do shared coordinates, that everything's working correctly and it's assigned the right coordinates.
Yep.
Can you imagine giving an architect Civil 3D?
Oh man.
Okay.
Any questions online? I guess a good question is how many Revit users do we have online? We have what do we got online here? Got about 29 through people. Let's see one. Oh, so we had one Revit users. We had a lot of civil. Okay, there we go. We got some
Where are
more
my Revit
users.
people? Come on. Well, civil people. I mean, it's seriously. How many of you
Yeah.
guys are working or giving content and you're having topography issues?
Yeah, I guess how many of you civil people there online are coordinating with Revit department, the architectural department? How many of y'all are actually doing the coordination? Let's see here. I see two people that are actually coordinating.
Two people are sitting there going, "Yeah, I have to deal with this crap all the time."
Yeah, the rest of them are no, we're in our own little silo. So
No, and it's good we're recording this because you can take it back and give it back to people and say, "Look, we back in the old AutoCAD days when I first started, we all worked in a silo, right?
Mhm.
Even when I was working in plain AutoCAD, I'd start my buildings at 0, 0, I'd draw my lines, and we didn't take into account what was going on with the site, what was going on with the location, where it is in the world, what the units were. We were drafting, right?
Yeah.
And drafting is really an activity and tool of the past. It's not something that you do on a primary basis anymore. You still draft details and stuff like that, but that's really less common as you build a 3D model. And so I think if I was telling a Civil 3D user what I really needed out of you guys is accuracy.
Yeah.
Take the time to check your files and make sure that they're correct. But also what you give to me is really important. Like I don't need to see all the profile cuts. I don't need to see, I basically, when I set the project up, I need the conditions at the time that we start the design that have the coordinates in it. And then if that's a separate file, if the existing survey is a separate file, and you do your design in a design file, that actually helps me out because then I can XREF in what's new and use that to build my topography and not have to worry about having a coordinate difference because I started from that one fixed file that is the survey that I based my project on. We actually take that file that we get from you guys and we save it. We rename it as Revit survey base for the project. We give it a name so people know that it's a file that doesn't get changed, it doesn't get deleted, it doesn't get moved. And we set coordinates from that one file and the file's never edited again.
Yeah.
So, and that one's also purged and cleaned up and make sure that it doesn't have anything going beyond the 20-mile radius. It's just basically a fixed point in time that we use to define the project. Then I really want to be able to XREF your stuff back in and use those same coordinates so that as you do your grading, as you do your surfaces, anything like that, I can actually see where they physically are. So that if I need to convert like a series of contours over to a topo surface, then I can do that.
Yeah.
And just makes my life a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah. I guess how many people are online are actually on the are using ACC right now on the cloud, Autodesk Construction Cloud? Okay, it's just like we got the same people. Anybody else using the construction cloud? N60 Cloud Player Pro. Okay. Very few people. So
Okay, well,
that's good though.
I understand why on the civil side because desktop connector has been a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And
I'm testing that right now for some clients, and going through my process. So to see if they're gonna enjoy
my
it.
comment back to Autodesk was, why are you still using the sheet set manager? I actually said something. Yeah, Tracy, you got a few projects in there. I got 1,100 of them, right?
Yeah.
And they have CAD. I have projects that are all AutoCAD at ACC. And so the big thing for me was, what had to happen with Desktop Connector 16. So they changed the APIs that they were using to build Desktop Connector, and they switched them over to use OneDrive APIs.
Mhm.
And by doing that, they gave it a more consistent behavior with how it interacts with the operating system. But people have to be aware, Sheet Set Manager in itself is what, 25 years old? That
Yeah, it's
code
pretty
was
old.
written long before we even thought about using the internet as a host and doing cloud-based projects. And so the code that's used for that, the XML files and stuff like that, they're not always playing nice when they're outside of a typical Windows SMB environment. They work really well when you're on the local server or local hard drive because of the connections.
Mhm.
Yeah, I see that with SSM detect mode set to off. We actually have that set to on based on the kind of projects that we're doing and what we're working on. And so we use both the web version and the legacy version, depending on the version of Revit or AutoCAD that we're using.
Mhm.
It's like we have a 2024 project that we're using now that we're using the SSM for web on. And I know that has restricted features over what you would have with the traditional sheet set manager, with legacy set manager, like plotting, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I actually took a support case with another set of users that were like, I can't right click and publish from sheet set manager. Why don't you just go to batch plot and go to the publish command in AutoCAD and set up a sheet list there and not worry about sheet set manager to do
Yeah.
that. Create that list so that if you don't have that functionality in web, you don't need it. You have another tool that already does this, right?
Yeah.
So I will tell you, 16.5 was pretty stable for us on Sheet Set Manager. The 16.6.0, if you did that one, you need to go ahead and go. If you have that one installed, you need to go ahead and go to 16.6.1. They did find a defect where files were not getting unlocked
Mhm.
with 16.6.0. And so they fixed that 3 weeks later with 16.6.1. Desktop Connector is going to get updated every 2 months. You may as well get used to it. You know, that they stay on top of that program. They're constantly working, trying to fix it.
Yeah.
But switching to the new APIs was something that they needed to do to get it more stable and to get it to work better with legacy programs like Sheets.
Yeah. So what did y'all do the day everything went down? Was it last year for a day? What happened to y'all?
Oh, you're talking about when the
everything-
whole site went down?
Yeah, the whole site, everybody that was in the cloud went down. So
Do you know
what
that
happened then?
that's 1 day out of 4 years.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was just kind of curious what y'all did.
Well, we had people were still able to work on local copies. And see,
Yeah.
now with the new version Desktop Connector, you're working on that file in that ACC docs folder, right?
Yeah.
So like with Revit, we were telling people save your changes, don't try to sync, right?
Yeah.
And with any of the AutoCAD stuff, all you gotta do is save, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then what we would do is tell them to go back and just, once the site came back up, open the file up and save it again. And then that would force the push up to the cloud, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
I promise you, I have been on file servers that go down once a friggin' week, right?
Yeah.
You run out of disk space. Oh my God, how many times did that ever happen, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
and
was kind
so
of wondering if they were working off the local, like a local cache copy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's
so,
that what we
Yeah.
showed in the presentation. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
C users, the username, and then
Mhm.
right under the username, you're going to see DC and ACC docs. And that is the local copy of what comes out of the cloud. Now, here's another tip too. You want to make sure that for a project that you're working on, like you're actively working on a project.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can actually do this. Let me in my slideshow real quick and see if I can get out of this. And I'm going to open up File Explorer for you real quick so that you can see this. But if I go look underneath Autodesk Docs right now, okay, and I go to a folder for a project, like these are our template project files, right? And our masters. And so what I can do is if I want something to stay on my drive, it depends on how I'm actually doing this. But if I show more options, actually, I always miss this button here. There's only 2 options now with Desktop Connector. Okay.
Mhm.
There used
Yeah.
to be all kinds of things like sync this device, make this link.
Mhm.
But again, because you're based on the OneDrive APIs now, there's only 2 tools up here that are specific to the Desktop Connector, and that's always keep on this device. And what that does is that prioritizes those files. So normally, if you haven't worked on a file for 30 days, then the cache copy and collaboration cache and temp, that's removed, right? It goes out of here. But if you pick always keep on this device, then the files stay there until you tell it that they're not, right?
Yeah.
Now, the other flip side is if you're getting a problem with the files being corrupt, what you want to do is right click on the file again and say free up space. And this clears up the local cache copies in those hidden folders that we've been talking about in the temp files for AutoCAD. This cleans that stuff up, right? And it gets rid of it. But if you get to a point where stuff is just flat not working, it's not working like it's supposed to. And so you do what's called a reset. There's a tool called shell cleanup, and there's an Autodesk knowledge article on this. But if you look under your user profile and you look in that DC folder, if you turn desktop connector off, and this is the key, is you have to right click on this guy and you have to exit out of him, sign out of him. You have to be exited because this is going to involve deleting that local copy. And so, like I said, you keep getting files and they don't work. What you do is come in here and you basically delete this project folder, whatever you're connecting to, right? And that clears that cache out, but it won't delete the files in the cloud if you are signed out. If you don't sign out, you're going to delete your files in the cloud. They're going to go in the recycle bin up in the cloud. You don't die. You're not going to die.
Yeah.
You know, I'm saying, oh my God, I've killed all these files. No, they go in the recycle bin on the cloud, but then you got time to restore them, and that's a pain in the butt, right?
Yeah.
So again, you do always keep on this device for something you're actively working in, and that prioritizes the things and make sure that things work faster with what you have in the cloud. But then if you get errors, do free up space, clear your collaboration cache, clear out your temp files as much as you can. And if all else fails, you go to this folder and just delete everything and let it resync everything back down again.
Yeah.
We do this for AutoCAD errors constantly.
Yeah.
Here's that reference explorer I was talking about earlier. You go in and look at this guy and you say browse for a file. See if I'm gonna find one in here that I can actually look at. But if I go to my, let's see where I want here. I'm gonna go to my sandbox project files, look at my working area. And so I've got, actually let's go to my resources where I have all my templates. So Revit. I don't use Revit templates anymore. I actually use predefined Workshare starter files, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I open this up, I can actually pick one of these. And then what you're looking for, let's see, it's going to download the file, take a look at it. And now it's basically looking at every single link that's going on with the file. This is great. This file doesn't have any links in it, no problem. But if I had links, you can actually set up a graph that would actually show all the connections and everything that's connected up to it. And it's going to show you where the errors are, where something's missing, where you have a circular reference. This used to be an enterprise account only tool, but they rolled it out with Desktop Connector 16. And let me tell you something, I love this thing. I actually had a Bentley guy tell me the other day to solve problems that they're having with files in ProjectWise. They used a reference actually open up a file in PW Working and look at all the friggin' links. I had somebody from Bentley actually told me that because they like the tool.
Wow.
They think this is great, right? Different type of graph layouts, organic. It's just a really cool little tool for how to find those locations and clean that stuff up, right?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those really neat little ticks. And then when you're in the desktop connector, you always want to make sure you select your projects. This is another way that you can copy files up to your project location. Here's another tip I'll give you on this one real too. And I know we're over, but I'll go ahead and tell you this one. If you're doing Revit and you're trying to move from an old project to a new one, you definitely you can copy the AutoCAD files all day long. You can actually go into that ACC docs folder and zip up all the CAD files, put them in a zip file. I use 7-zip for that. And then copy them over to the new project location underneath that same shortcut in File Explorer, and then extract that zip file and tell it to go back to the same folder, and it maintains that structure. So as long as you're using relative XREFs, it's clean as a whistle to copy this stuff over. If you're using absolute links, get out, go somewhere else. Stop using absolute links, references.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be using them at all. And so this allows you to do the same thing. It actually go find files from another location and copy them to a different location. If you're doing this with Revit files, only 2023 and newer files can physically be moved without recreating them as simple. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything before that, you actually had the path was hard coded into the files. And so when you want to move an older Revit file like 2022 and newer, you save it to your local hard drive, open it up, tell it you're going to work in it temporarily, and then say save as cloud model, and that recreates it as a central file as long as it was one before in the new location. Doesn't take a lot of time, but if you got 100 Revit models on a project, it can be a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But AutoCAD files, Civil 3D files, Plant 3D, all that good stuff, you can move those all day long. Just zip the folder up. That's the best way to do it. That way you make sure you get everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for the love of God, don't create an archive folder or a 30% submittal folder. Use your versioning that's available.
Yeah.
That one always gets me.
Archive backup.
All right, I'm going to have to dance off of here.
Yeah.
Tony, is always, it's phenomenal to see you.
Good seeing you too. Great, really great stuff. Everybody's been really knocking out. Let's see. Does somebody have a question? What to use to work?
Yeah, I talked
Okay.
about that one a second ago.
Okay.
I have it set on because of the number of projects that I have.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get into a set and you're running into the problems, yeah, you can turn it off.
Yeah.
I would probably tell you, try out the one for web right now and do your plotting back from a plot list. The projects I have doing that stuff are very stable. They're very fast. I'm not having issues with data shortcuts at all.
Mm-hmm.
Several guys, their stuff has been really clean, so we hadn't really had a whole lot of problems with them. The only time is when we go back to that legacy XML file that's pulled from a local drive still. That one still have a few issues with that guy.
Yeah.
Here's a better thing. Stop using Sheet Set Manager. Oh, I heard that one. I'm sure between Randy and Tracy and everybody else on here, they're going to be sitting here going, I'm not going to stop using Sheet Set Manager. Yeah, it's
it's
okay.
going to be a
We have
while
therapy
from the
session
civil
for you,
team to
right?
stop using Sheet Set Manager.
It's like,
So,
I've always done it this way. God, I hate
yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest challenging thing when you're a CAD or BIM manager. The term I've always done it this way. It's if it's not broken, why we're going to try to fix it, you know? So I hear that all the time from even PMs, like, well, I have a system, it works, and we're profitable, we're knocking out plans, but you have to physically show them. You can't just explain it to them. I have to physically show them the new workflow, how beneficial it is, how more productive you can be with the new workflows. But yeah, I've always done it this way. I hear that a lot. So
I'll tell you something else you need to probably do if you're on the call. You might want to look at this. This is a plug, a shameless plug. How can I link my files together without Sheet Set Manager? You can do it the old fashioned way. I mean, the cool thing about, like I said, about this desktop connector and how it's set up is you can still create your XREFs. I mean, you can XREF things in and use the XREF Manager and use the Reference Explorer to actually see them, right? But I'm a big advocate I mainly use Sheet Set Manager for printing, right? That was the big thing for me. I wanted to be able to print a whole set and I wanted to have predefined value set. I use the publish command and use sheet list all the time. I found that to be more stable. It's a simple DSD file that does work in ACC. It is supported. And so it's really simple to keep that one file in there and just have that sheet list that you can actually copy and share. So think about this. If you do a project template, I'm an MEP guy, architecture, not so much civil, but I know civil people actually have, they like to use a lot of layout tabs, right? Predefined page setups in them. And so you might have a template that you're doing roadway design that you'll already have all your layout tabs and everything set up in there with all the page setups, right? That's what you should be doing. You look at the type of process and what you're designing. And then if I'm going to have different plans, my details, whatever, that I'm keeping that one drawing, I'm not an advocate of doing, then I actually, I have that set up in my template, but the page setups is the critical part.
Yeah.
You want to have those defined and have them assigned to your layout tab. And then you just create a sheet list by going in and say, hey, give me just these tabs. Don't include model space, but just give me this.
Yeah.
Then you pick them all up, get your sheet list done, save it, you're off to the races.
Yep.
And I XREF my title blocks in too. You link detailed reference numbers within SSM to my plan views. That's a limitation that you would run into. You wouldn't necessarily get that if you're doing your reference numbers. That's one of the drawbacks. In AutoCAD Architecture and Project, we use Project Navigator for that. We didn't use Sheet Set Manager for that. And so that was, to me, was a better tool, but it never made it over to Civil 3D. Want to go back to the old days, Tony?
Yeah.
Remember that when everybody was working in AutoCAD MEP, it was Sheet Set Manager on steroids, but it didn't need the Sheet Set Manager stuff because each file had its own XML file. To track that information. It was a property set definition. Civil 3D got their property set definitions from AutoCAD Architecture. They just ported that part over. But you could use a field. That's one thing you could do. You could have a field in that file.
Mhm.
Might be a little bit more to set up, but
Yeah, yeah,
anyway, like I said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to use the web version because it's been
yeah.
more stable.
Yeah.
My,
Okay,
my,
well, man, I appreciate, all the great tips on the ACC and on the Revit, David. And if I guess if somebody wants to get a hold of you, you want to put it in your chat. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'll put my home email address in here just
Yeah,
because that's the best way to get up with me. Um,
lots of great stuff. So, like always.
yeah, and you can talk to me on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I talk to people on LinkedIn all the time.
Yeah.
You can do that. My last plug that I was going to do a minute ago, go look at my EU class called Becoming Digital Twin Enabled.
Hmm.
And that one I'm actually talking about the elimination of the sheet from the design delivery
Hmm.
in CAD standards. We make the argument for changing the deliverable to intelligent views.
Hmm.
And I think that one's going to be a fascinating. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. Like, we got too many ornery people my age, right? But
Yeah,
I've wanted people to start thinking about, if you really want to change how things are happening, you have to be
yeah,
willing to walk away from things like a sheet set manager.
yeah,
What is it that I'm doing right now that requires me to use it, and how much work does it add to a project? And is
yeah,
there a better way for me to do that?
yeah, yeah,
So check that one out. It's called Becoming Digital Twin Enabled at
yeah,
AU 2020.
yeah.
All right.
Yep, cool. Well, thanks,
Pissed a lot of
David.
people off of that class.
I'm sure there was a couple of frowns.
I had a guy, one of the agency guys, get up and walk out and give me a horrible review. This guy thinks I'm an idiot. No, we're all idiots because we're stuck in what we've done for years. All right,
That's
guys,
good.
it was
Okay,
great. Thank you very much. Now I'm going
thank
to be on
you.
this afternoon. I'll be sitting and watching him.
Yeah, you want to stop sharing?
Yep.
And our next presenter is Ryan Brown, and he is from Autodesk, and he will be talking about Autodesk InfoDrainage. So if you've never used InfoDrainage, that's the new hydraulic tool they have. Oh, actually, a whole suite, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. It's not just InfoDrainage. There's actually a whole suite of hydraulic tools and drainage tools. And so I'll let Ryan take over and do his short presentation. So welcome,
Yeah,
Ryan.
yeah, thanks for having me. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. It's a whole suite of different programs. I think a lot of people just kind of gravitate towards drainage
Mhm.
design because it's such a typical thing for an AutoCAD person
Mhm.
to or a Civil 3D person to really pick up, since we have some of those other analyze tools like SSA and
Mhm.
HydroFlow and stuff like that. So we were part of an acquisition. We're now officially known and being marketed as Autodesk Water Infrastructure, formerly a company called Innovize, where we have products for modeling potable water systems, wastewater systems, asset management, stormwater systems, etc. But like Tony said, we're going to focus on InfoDrainage, and I'll start out by saying I'm not a CAD guy. Um, my background is in drainage design and civil engineering and water resources. So I might not know where all the buttons and things are, but I will certainly do my best. So this is admittedly a model that did come in through the ribbon toolbar. So with the InfoDrainage install, you will get this ribbon toolbar within here. And just some things I want to point out to start out with is everything is three-dimensionally represented, including the BMPs here. So these like white outlines are BMPs that we have listed in here. We also get the catchments to carry over with all the attributes that are associated with those as well, and everything being represented there. Just popping out of that though, and going back to north. Let's see, fumbling around. Yeah, getting back to kind of where we were before, I'm going to export this into an InfoDrainage file. And this is really part of the whole going back and forth between Civil 3D and just seeing the number of things that get captured when you're going back and forth to here. So you can see here, I don't have anything in this folder. This is a brand new file. If you did have an existing InfoDrainage file and you were going back and forth, you could certainly just overwrite that file. And so you're not ending up with like a bunch of different ones. But this is actually one of our training models. So I'm just going to name it training model and hit save here. Once I hit next, it's going to ask me if I want what network I want to dish out. I didn't do that in the drop down over there. But there are capabilities. If you do have a surface in there, you can select a surface that you want to get exported with that as well. Once I hit next, this is really kind of the probably more the neat thing that comes along here. So we do have the capability of differentiating between types of pipes with the Civil 3D parts family awareness. So if you have concrete pipe versus HDPE pipe, you can specify that. Of course, when we go into the modeling world, we don't really care if it's a concrete pipe. We just care if it's a 12-inch pipe and then the associated Mannings in that goes with it. But for this, I'm going to type these in real quick. And if you do have these configurations already set up, if you have kind of like a full catalog of all the parts families and part sizes, you can save these configurations and use them across different projects. A lot of things can be templatized in here. I'm just going to kind of make up some things for what I'm doing in here because, like I said, I'm not a CAD guy and I don't have a great parts family, but the concept is still kind of the same here. So I'm just going to put in what 18-inch 1.5, and then we'll just say this is 4 foot by 4 foot, just to make it easy. So once I hit finish here, it is going to go through the process of exporting that out into a new file. I can pull up my Windows Explorer. I can see that that new training model has been created in here. I've got some other templatized libraries in here as well. But we get that new training model in there. And just some different warnings and things like that. But I've already looked through these and it's nothing to be too terribly concerned about. Once we flip over into InfoDrainage and open an existing, I've navigated to where I was, where I saved that model in there. You can see the timestamp there on the East Coast. So not Central Time, but Eastern Time. But once I hit open, you'll get an idea of what really carries over between the two. So since I started out in InfoDrainage and had some BMPs in here, those BMPs get captured here as well. So when you're going back and forth, even if you do have BMPs, you're not having to recreate those necessarily all the time. We can pull up the information associated with them, and a lot of that data kind of gets saved within the files when you're going back and forth and exchanging things. Kind of the first step in all of this in general is to create a flow path and then size the network. So just as an example here, I've created just this simple flow path. We can pull up the profile, looking at the profile here. But the real key thing in here is once I do have that set up, I can then size the network. Because this is a new file, I don't have any rainfall information in here, and I need some rainfall information in order to be able to size things, because we're ultimately going to use the rational method to size capacity in here. It is fairly easy to create these NOAA rainfall distributions, which will give us an IDF curve. At the same time, if you have jurisdictions or certain areas and certain rainfall events that you have, you can save those in a templated format. So imagine coming up with libraries of these rainfall managers, and depending on where you're working, you can save those and use them across those different projects. I'm going to cancel out of that and then pull up my NOAA rainfall generator. We get a nice map of the US. I can select a location of where I want to do my work, and then the different temporal distributions. But for this purpose, I'm just going to stick with Atlas 14, generate that rainfall profile. I can add in additional rainfall periods and return frequencies. And once I hit go to the duration of the storm, I'm just going to do the 24-hour storm and then all the different quartiles and percentage occurrences. It's downloading that data directly from NOAA's website. So once I hit OK, I now have a rainfall event that I can use within my preliminary sizing. So within the preliminary sizing here, this is a wizard step through where I can basically automate the process of setting the diameters and setting the inverts without having to do a whole lot of guesswork. This is really a true design tool where we're not just punching in numbers and hoping for the best, but actually stepping through a routine to be able to optimize these designs. Like I mentioned, I get the return period here. So I do have, again, the rational method being used and that NOAA Atlas 14 rainfall event that I have. So I'm going to size this for the 10-year. Once I hit next, there are some just defaults that are built into here. So the manholes actually get sized in here as well, depending on what pipes are going in and out. With this, again, being able to save templates, I can open up my standard manholes library that I have in here. So some different, connection maximums and the diameter and whatever else, and the diameter and things like that associated with it. Same thing with the pipe library, pulling that up, and then the standard pipes here, just the different diameter pipes that I have, and really just the idea not ending up with, odd diameters like a 19-inch pipe or something like that. So once I hit OK there, I do have the option of minimizing the amount of excavation in my network, but I also have the opportunity to minimize the pipe diameter, maybe limiting costs that way. So it's really just a balance of where you want to minimize that cost. For this one, I'm just going to stick with minimizing the maximum elevation, and then again, setting up some boundary conditions, making sure velocities are within an acceptable range. I'm going to turn off allowing backdrops because that's really pretty atypical of jurisdictions in the US especially, and then making sure we have enough cover over everything compared to that surface. So if you remember, we did select the surface to come over here. So we do have that surface populated into there, and that's going to be used within this cover depth. So once I hit next, it's going to give me a summary of all the things that changed in here. If it couldn't meet some of the criteria, it will flag that. And you can go through and do some manual adjustments just because it isn't, a 100% perfect solution, but it should certainly get you down to, 90% of your ultimate design. But you can see what these previous values were, and then once you hit finish, it does update the network with those new values for both the manholes and the pipes. Additionally to that, if I were to come in here and start to move things around, if I need to, reset where things are, I can do that as well. If there's a change to the proposal, we can reference CAD data into here as well. So being able to pull that information in, and it is an XREF file that gets brought in. So it is truly, you can refresh that file, and as design updates come into play, being able to do that. Once I get everything to where a point that I like it and I want to push that back into Civil 3D, I just need to save the file and then come back into my Civil 3D file there. Close that just for the sake, but we've got that one pipe network in there. I'm going to now import from InfoDrainage, and I'm going to select the training model that I just saved there. So once I open it and hit next, I am choosing the network. It's going to override the network that I have in here. So any connections that you might have maintained to different profiles you have set up or whatever else, all that's going to be maintained, and those and all the data within the pipe network and manholes are going to be updated as well. So just hitting next here, you might notice with it, I do have some things already populated. So again, it's able to pick up on the idea that I had these originally in here, and that I've already had them mapped, so it's going to auto map some of that stuff for me. And then I've got some additional things in here. So if you remember, I did make some changes to the manholes. So there were some different manholes that were updated as well. So we can see there was one that was updated here. And if we scroll over to the right, that's not populated just because we did make those changes, but it's just a matter of coming through and again, selecting those different things. And I'm just going to pick kind of random ones because again, it's not a super great parts library, but really the concept is here that we're able to identify the parts family and the part size there. So once I hit finish, it's going to start that routine of bringing that data in. It does take a second here. And my parts family is not recognized. So I did, it looks like I did have some missing data in there that didn't quite populate correctly. Again, the pipe network isn't super great, but do notice those changes that we moved all the network. And then if we go into the pipe network and the listing of the pipes, all of that getting carried over as well. If you were to take this to the next step in InfoDrainage and actually create a full run, so the ultimate goal in InfoDrainage is to route everything, a true hydrograph through the system. And so that's going to take into account the storage that might be in ponds and routing through the ponds, storage in the network and things like that. So once we do all that and do that full analyses, those results also come over. I don't have it populated in here, but the HGL and EGL do come over. So again, with those connections you have maintained with different profiles, and if you have it set up so that you're plotting the HGL and EGL, you'll be able to have that automatically being updated on those profiles. I guess the next kind of tips and tricks thing I wanted to share was just the number of templates, the number of things that could be saved as a templated format. In this object templates, again, being able to save these kind of full libraries of different objects. So as you, do more and more projects and you have more and more things built out, most notably, I think, is stormwater controls, just because there are things like proprietary underground chambers and things like that. And so I can create a new object template. If you're starting from scratch, excuse me, it will ask you to create a new template library. So I'm just going to name it objects. And in here we can specify whether it's a parabolic chamber or box culvert. And so once I do get this created, it's not named anything, let's say contact something, I don't know, I'll just name it contact, just for simplicity's sake. If it's a circular chamber or a box culvert, or I can even put in customized cross sections in here as well. And I guess going back into just the basic one here, setting base elevations, these can be left default values or whatever, but if I have like a number of chambers and rows, I can go ahead and specify that out with the number of things that I have in there. If you're having any trouble understanding what these different things mean over here on the left, we do have this handy guide here at the bottom. But once you do get things set up so that you have what you want in here, again, saving these, and then you'll notice over, if I close that out, notice on the right side here, in addition to that kind of basic chamber, that default kind of thing that I have in there, I have that contact chamber in there as well. So just a matter of dragging and dropping and then drawing the outline if necessary to be able to have that in there. Other things that can be templated, things like the reports. Reports that get spit out of here can be templatized as well. Let's see, I'm gonna just undo all this stuff because I get back to a point that I know this is going to be a valid model. This is not a valid model. So I'm gonna delete some of this stuff in here. I am missing, so yeah, I'm missing some diameters and stuff like that. In that case, I'm just gonna pull up a different model that I know works because not everything necessarily is within the model when you do export it from Civil 3D, getting back into here. So I don't want to waste a bunch of time trying to get all that stuff back together. Guess while we're waiting for that to pull up, going back to some of the object templates in here, inflow areas. So if you have specific hydrographs or base flows you want to include, also junction information. If I add in an additional junction here, a new manhole, you can specify that unique parts family. You can edit those parts families within the dialog up here as well. So if you needed to add additional junctions or additional connections, you could do that in this dialog as well. But hopping back into the object templates and the junction that I just created, we do have inlet capacity restriction as well. So if you did have an inlet coming in, you could do it by rating curve or HEC 22. And again, because this is a template, you can set up different configurations for curb opening or curb and gutter opening, combination gutter, sag or on grade, really just kind of anything in there. And then just going through, of course, and updating like the road cross slope and gutter cross slope and things like that that might need to be updated, but things like gutter width and Manning's End, those are probably going to be things that kind of stay the same between the two. Same thing with the choosing the grate type and then choosing the width and length of the grate type as well. If you have any clogging factors, those can be included as well. So you can kind of set up the library for, let's say we want to set up one this is combination grate on grade. We can certainly have that set up for all those different individual things, and then again be able to populate that into a new set of files. Going back to this, now that we have it pulled up, this has valid data in it, so just use that. Okay, there we go. So in the analysis tab, I've already got this run, so I'm just going to use the reports that are in here. These audit reports can be really useful too, especially if you're working in certain jurisdictions that require a certain amount of depth over everything, or require the velocities to be within a certain range. Those can be included in here as well. I'm going to look at just the full bore velocity and say max of 10, minimum of 1, just to see if we get some that fail. Keep in mind that only the things that fail the audit are going to show up in this report, but it can be just a quick kind of dummy check, making sure that things aren't failing, things that are staying within those regulatory requirements that you might be restricted to. Just a quick way to be able to identify that kind of stuff. Same thing with this comparison report. We do have phase management built into here. So I've got an existing and developed phase. You can select the storm event that you want to compare and then different tabular results. If you did want to compare things like stormwater controls or connections or something like that, we do have some options for that as well, with the inputs being changed here, just to see how things change from one phase to another down here at the bottom. I personally think that phase comparison is probably one of the more useful ones. And then once I go through here, I'm going to do max outflow in a tabular format, as well as looking at a graphical format. I can update that preview and get a quick look at what my max outflow is in each one of my phases, and then also get a graphical representation to make sure that the existing peak is above or at the same as the developed. And again, being able to save these and use them across different projects can be pretty useful. I guess kind of the last thing that I'll highlight is in a lot of the data objects in here, there are calculators. I think we counted them up. I think there's 20 or 30 of these calculators. Some of them are more like lookup tables, arguably. But the idea here is to cut down on the number of iterations that might need to be used in a development of a BMP or whatever else. So you can use the plan data or user input data. Since I've already got the pipe network cut up, it's able to read off the catchments that are entering into the pipe system and then ultimately into the BMP. I specify a discharge rate, and I just want to get a quick estimate of how big this BMP needs to be in order to meet that discharge requirement. Like I said, it's just kind of a quick and dirty cut down on the number of iterations thing. So it does just give you a range there. And once I hit OK, it gives me an average of that range and then updates my network. And that wasn't very exciting. So I think I had the same discharge rate in there. So let's change that to 5, calculate again. Get that range, hit OK, get the average of that range, and now I've updated that footprint in there. And once I hit apply, it updates on my plan view as well. With this, I can also have some of those restrictions in there. If I did have restrictions, and I know this is a BMP, this applies a little more to the manholes, but if I want to use a calculator to get an idea of how big things need to be in order to limit the amount of bypass. I have this in here as well. So let's just say cross slope, longitudinal slope of 2%, gutter cross slope 3%, 3-foot width, and the concrete innings in there. I'm gonna do 3 and 3 in here as well. And once we get that slide in there, it must be missing some data. Oh, missing some data. We're just gonna use user data, make it easy. So say 10 CFS is getting to here. So we see the amount of gutter spread in the bypass as well as the approach flow and how much is being captured in there. Really easily, very visually appealing. We can also look at it in a section view. So we can start to tweak these numbers, maybe getting more width. Since this is on grade, width is going to have a lot more impact on things, and I put a big width there as well. So we're capturing a little bit more in this case, and so on and so forth, making tweaks and changes to be able to capture the amount that we want. And once we hit OK, we do get that information automatically populated now into this capacity type for further things. I guess the last thing with the templates that I forgot to mention, if you do create something in the plan view and you're like, shoot, I'd really like to use that on a different project, or maybe you need to like duplicate some pipes or something like that for whatever reason, you can just right click on these and add the individual BMPs to a template. You can also switch out the template here. So if I wanted to, let's say I had an existing developed and then maybe developed green or scenario, I could come into here, create that duplicate phase. Let's rename it to Dev Green. And since I'm now on this Dev Green, let's say I want to switch out this template into a buyer retention cell. It's something that's a little more green. It's going to update. The outline stays the same, but again, right clicking and then replacing the outline. It's pretty easy to change the size of that. I can also double click onto here now and see that the parameters are now switched out to the buyer retention necessary things, filtration layers and whatever else in here. Again, got some calculators in here if you have the field capacity and wilting point of those. Can calculate the conductivity for you. So yeah, guess I can kind of stop there. That was about 30 minutes. I don't know, Tony, if you have anything to add or
Yeah, I don't know if I missed it. Can you bring in the watersheds that are connected to those inlets from Civil 3D?
yeah, so if you have
Uh,
subcatchments
mhm,
laid out into here, so I've got a bunch, there's these purple outlines. I know there's some the tools in here like water trace and water drop trace and stuff like that. You could certainly draw those out into these catchments, and then once you export that to InfoDrainage, it will.
So these are actual Civil 3D catchments. They're not like parcels or something.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. All right.
And I guess if I pull properties, yeah. So
Yeah.
you can see here runoff coefficients, time
Yeah. And
concentrations.
then, yeah. And then you can reference the structure. Okay. Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
and then the default for it is when you export this into InfoDrainage, if the
Mhm.
manhole is within the catchment, it's just going to automatically assign that catchment
Oh, yeah, it's
to the
better.
manhole.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're not having to like preference necessarily.
Every
If you
single
have
one by one.
yeah, if you have two like this, I think it just chooses one. I'm not sure if one gets a priority over the other,
Mhm.
but it's really simple just to remap those. And then as you go back and forth more and more, it's gonna remember those kinds of things.
Okay. So when you bring it back in, it's just going to, let's say you've got it profiled, it's going to update the pipes if it's getting resized, right? And then it's going to update the energy grade line and hydraulic grade line data for the
Right.
pipe, right?
Yep.
So, okay. Okay.
And that's really, I mean, it seems,
Mhm.
one, really beneficial because we've had plenty of
Mhm.
people ask for it, and two, I don't know that there's another software out there that has that capability.
Mhm. Okay. What's my next question? I've been playing around with the software a little bit, but I love the flexibility to be able to go grab that rainfall data with the NOAA website and just bring it in for, yeah, that's a really cool feature. You don't have to go and manually create it, create your table like an SSA or something. So to be able to just type an address and go grab it, download it, 'cause I know now I'm in Texas, so that's kind of the major place that people are going now is a NOAA
Yeah.
website. So
Sorry if people are in the Pacific Northwest. I know that Atlas 14 hasn't gotten up there yet, but
yeah.
for a large part of the country.
Yep. Let's see, what is the next one? And I think I may have asked this in one of your webinar is you can type in a clogging factor, right? If you're using a grate and say, hey, I'm going to use a conservative value, maybe a 25% clogging factor for that inlet.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you have the restriction set up,
Mhm.
you can't do that. If it's no restriction, obviously you can't really do that. But
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
it's good to know too. I haven't really played around with the flow rated, but it looks like you can save those as well, or I guess just import them from
Yeah.
a simple table.
So if you have a curb inlet on your street, is it going to show and let's say it's on grade, is it going to
Mhm.
show you if there is bypass on that inlet and say, hey, yeah, if you
In
maxed it and there's some small amount of bypass?
Not necessarily in this dialogue, but
Mhm.
certainly within the calculator. So
Okay.
if you have the same parameters set up there, I guess alternatively, because you can't set up bypass destinations, if you
Mhm.
have flow going through that bypass uh, connection, let's say
Mhm.
you create a triangular channel
Yeah.
and use that as your basically the representation of the
Mhm.
curb, then you could see flow going through there and
Mhm.
get an idea of
Mhm.
what's going on.
The next question I may have is some engineering companies I used to work for, they used to be ultra conservative. So they would design their whole system at full flow conditions. So when you pipe size, is there an option to say, hey, I'm going to design for full flow, the whole system?
Yeah, so I mean the ultimate analysis and the things that get reported on, the results and everything, that is a true dynamic solution. So it's not like the preliminary sizing where we're just using a rational
Yeah.
full flow capacity. And unfortunately, there's not really a way of reporting on that data, although we've gotten plenty of feedback on that and kind of toying around with some ideas there. But all the analysis is a true routing of a hydrograph through the system, so it's not necessarily full flow. I guess the only alternative that I can think of is if you did want to increase the rainfall by a certain percentage, you certainly could do that. And then I guess if you just wanted to run inflows, if you did have that like capacity flow, you could swap out these catchments for base flows where it's a, whoops, I thought I was needing to draw an outline, where you can just specify that flow amount, and then once you run the simulation, it would effectively be a steady state, full capacity kind of approach.
Okay, cool. Yeah, really, I feel like, yeah, it's like the next step from SSA. I use SSA, and then now you're going up to the next level with this product.
Sure.
So, and like I said to everybody else, this is just one piece of the suite of products y'all have.
Yeah, this one's arguably the one that works the best with Civil 3D. We've got another product called InfoWorks ICM that has a little bit where we can do some pipe network exchanges, but not nearly as robust as this is.
Okay. That's really all the questions I have. Anybody online have any questions? I don't know if we have any H&H engineers online or designers that do hydraulic design or even detention or watersheds and stuff like that. So, but yeah. So far, no questions, but definitely appreciate you coming online and sharing this information. You know, I try to push this product when I'm out there teaching and tell people about InfoDrainage, you know, take a test drive with it. I'm trying to learn it and trying to master it. So it's going to take a little bit to go from the storm. I use hydrographs a little bit, HydroFlow Express tools, and then some of the storm sewer tools in there, and then of course SSA. But yeah, I'm definitely excited learning this product and stuff. So, has anybody online actually heard of the product or are actually testing the product out right now? And
I guess on that note, there are free trials available for this program.
Yeah. We got one person that's actually testing it out or using it. Anybody else is testing the product or using the product right now? So we got one person. Okay.
And I guess with that, you know, if you are testing it, you know, certainly reach out to Tony, reach out to me, whatever. We don't want you to like spin your wheels and waste a bunch of time trying to figure out something that might be an easy solution.
And y'all have a really great YouTube channel. You know, y'all are posting out videos all the time. So check out their YouTube channel. Is it just a subset underneath the Autodesk website, or what is the YouTube channel itself?
Usually I just go to YouTube, and if you search Autodesk Water Infrastructure, you should get a channel that's like specific for all these products.
Okay. All right, Ryan, well, I appreciate it. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably just the email.
Okay, if you want to put it on the chat, if you want to have any additional questions about the product and the suite of products, you know, reach out to Ryan, and he'll help you out. So, all right, well, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it, and I will talk to you later, and we'll move on to our next instructor. Thank you. Let's see. All right, so our next instructor was Frank. Frank is not feeling well today, and he actually recorded a video for us to watch. Let me pull up the video. He's actually doing a tips and tricks on AutoCAD. So let me pull up that video that he made for us. So just a second. Find that video. Yeah, I'm sorry he wasn't able to come online. He's just not feeling well right now. So I'm going to share a screen here. And let me know if you can see the screen. Okay, everybody can see the screen. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play the video. Um, get your add to teams. I know. Enable sound from video sharing. Okay, so Hmm. Sorry, everyone. I got to try to figure out why the audio is not working. There is no option to allow that I can see. To yeah, let me try to share that. And let me stop recording.